Chapter 45-41. At the same time, East Africa. Alice rushed to the hospital with a large team. She arranged the police around the hospital and entered the hospital with Hua Jin in disguise. Then they sneaked into Gong Jie's room. In comparison, Gong Jie's room was relatively safe. However, outside the room there was heavy security. The FBI had already monitored the entire room. Gong Jie was slightly injured. Although he had passed the critical period when he was first sent to the hospital, if the wound had not been infected, the FBI would not have had the chance to do so. When injured in East Africa, the scariest thing was the plague and wound infection, as well as the complications after infection and inflammation. Because of the war, there were corpses everywhere. It was also because of these corpses that bacteria and viruses spread wantonly. Hua Jin had just walked into the ward when he saw Gong Jie leaning on the bed in full armor. He was pleasantly surprised. Gong! He had just said one word when he realized that he seemed to be overly excited and immediately restrained himself. Gong Jie did not expect that Hua Jin would suddenly appear. He turned his puzzled gaze to Alice. Alice whistled and quickly distanced herself. It has nothing to do with me. He snuck in himself. Snuck in. Gong Jie was doubtful of this statement. Alice lifted Hua Jin's collar with a look of disdain and the corners of her lips twitched. Please, do you know how he snuck into the army? He stole the mercenary uniform and combat bag, wrapped himself up tightly, and then openly snuck in. I'm convinced that I didn't even notice. Gong Jie's expression turned ugly when he heard this. What are you doing here? Hua Jin casually made up an excuse. I'm just here to take a look. You came to a war-torn area to take a look? Gong Jie snorted coldly. If your words are posted online, you'll be called a brainless idol. Hua Jin heaved a sigh of relief. I'm not a public figure anymore. There's no need for such taboos. When he was a public figure, he had to be on tenterhooks with every word he said. Every nerve in his body had to be stretched taut. Even when facing the camera, every word and sentence had to be prepared by the public relations company. Every word was very meticulous. If it was an ordinary person, even if they made a few jokes in private, it would be harmless and no one would take it to heart. As for public figures, their flaws and strengths would be magnified infinitely. Even if it was an unintentional mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. After leaving the entertainment industry for so long, he still hadn't gotten used to such a relaxed lifestyle. There were no paparazzi following them in the dark, and there were no busy drafts. Gradually, they could speak as they pleased. Alice glanced at Hua Jin from the corner of her eyes and said helplessly, Hey, do you have to be so arrogant? Why don't you just say that you're worried? Hua Jin was still stubborn. Who's worried? When Gong Jie heard this, his tense handsome face suddenly relaxed a little. Oh, you're here because you're worried about me? No. Hua Jin denied flatly and glared at Alice. If you talk nonsense again, You'll what? Chapter 45-42. Gong Jie looked at Hua Jin with a teasing gaze. The latter whistled awkwardly. She made it up. Got it. Of course, Gong Jie could tell that he was lying to him. Hua Jin snorted in his heart. What? Wasn't this man fine? He didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg like he had imagined. He thought that Gong Jie was seriously injured and trapped in East Africa. But in the end, his leg was fine and so was his arm. He didn't even know how to cry the tears he had prepared all the way here. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come. He would have taken such a big risk. But that was how he acted in a fit of pique. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Gong Jie was fine and had only suffered some minor injuries. He did not know how serious his injuries were, but at least he was not in any serious condition for now. Nothing was more important than a person being fine. Oh. Outside the hospital, the FBI has deployed many people. According to my observation, the hospital is surrounded by more than 20 agents. As for how many are outside the hospital, I'm not sure. Alice and Gong Jie sat opposite each other. The huge ward was filled with mercenaries. Gong Jie furrowed his brows in frustration. They won't give up until they catch me. They've schemed so much just to bring you back to the Nuremberg military court. I think those judges are already rubbing their hands and getting ready. If they can put you on trial, they can immediately retire with glory. That's not the problem. Gong Jia looked out of the window thoughtfully. I'm only thinking about one problem now. Huh. Alice looked at him in confusion. What's the problem? Gong Jia looked at her meaningfully. Do you still remember what day tomorrow is? Tomorrow. After he mentioned it, Alice was a little confused for a moment. That's right. Was tomorrow an important day? Alice raised her watch and looked at the date on it. She calculated tomorrow's date, but she couldn't think of anything important. Is there anything important tomorrow? Alice was at a loss. Gong Jia snorted in disdain and crooked his finger at her. Come here. Alice inched toward him curiously, but the man unceremoniously pinched her nose and flicked her forehead. It's my birthday tomorrow, dummy. Alice covered her forehead in pain, but when she heard Gong Jia say that tomorrow was her birthday, her eyes flickered a little. She slapped her forehead again. How could I forget? It's your birthday tomorrow. Maybe you haven't gotten over the jet lag yet. Humph, I think you don't care about this at all. Don't worry. Where's the present? Gong Jia opened his palm to her like a child, asking for a gift. Alice braced herself and replied, I didn't prepare a gift. Gong Jia cast a sidelong glance at her, clearly expressing his dissatisfaction. Behind them, Hua Jin looked at them silently. He felt that there was an indescribable chemistry between the two of them. It was said that the two of them had known each other for a long time and had gone through fire and water together. This kind of chemistry couldn't be cultivated overnight. Moreover, Alice had sacrificed so much for him. Because Gong Jia was infected with the virus, in order to save him, Alice used her own body to experiment on the vaccine. If it weren't for her, Gong Jia wouldn't have been able to survive the infection of the virus. And because her body was affected by the experiment, she lost her fertility. Chapter 45-43. She had never told him about it. Why? Was she afraid that he would feel guilty if he found out? Perhaps she did not want this matter to bind Gong Jia for the rest of his life. If it were another woman, she might have told Gong Jia about this matter to make him feel guilty. This way her love would become righteous. Then what if it was him? If he had sacrificed so much for someone, would he really remain silent? So far, the only person who could make him sacrifice without any complaints was Yun Shirshir. He had not dared to think that he would remove his cornea for Yun Shirshir. He had not dared to think about it before. He even thought that he would not do it. But now that things had developed to that point, he did it almost without any hesitation. Then, if the same thing happened again and the other party was Gong Jia, would he still do it? To be honest, he did not know if he could do what Alice did. Alice's love for Gong Jia was too heavy and too great. For Gong Jia, she personally brought people and came to East Africa to look for him regardless of the consequences. She loved Gong Jia so much. Why did she not confess to him? If Gong Jia knew about this, what would he think? Hua Jin was deep in thought when he heard Alice say, You're still thinking about a birthday present at this juncture? He came back to his senses and looked at Alice. However, he saw Alice looking at Gong Jia with a look of disdain. It's my birthday tomorrow. I'll have to trouble you. I'll celebrate it with you when we get back to the island. I want to celebrate it. Gong Jia even sighed. Originally, I wanted to rush back to celebrate my birthday with my sister. He was born on the same day as Yun Shirshir. His biggest wish was to celebrate his birthday with Yun Shirshir every year. He was afraid that he could not do it this year. Gong Jia could not help but feel a little regretful. I'll go outside and check if there are any FBI soldiers in the hospital. As Alice spoke, she stood up, looked around and said to Hua Jin, You stay in the ward obediently, do you hear me? I heard you. Alice walked out with her men. Hua Jin stared at Gong Jia's back. For a moment he was in a daze. He was hesitating whether or not he should tell him about it. It wasn't that he was being nosy. Instead, he had the right to know who had risked their lives to save him back then. It was not that he wanted to fight for something for Alice. Instead, it was a personal sacrifice. Although it was not for the sake of getting what he wanted, at the very least, he wanted to let Gong Jia know that he had paid such a huge price. This was the right of Gong Jia. It was also Alice's duty. Similarly, there was one more thing he wanted to confirm. Hua Jin suddenly plucked up his courage, walked in front of Gong Jia, and sat down opposite him. Gong Jia's knuckles, which were holding the teacup, stiffened. He looked at him in a daze. He had a feeling that he had something important to say to him. What's the matter? I think that Alice is actually quite good. Gong Jia was speechless. This sentence, which came out of nowhere, did indeed stun him. Yes, I know that she's quite good. What about you? How do you feel about her? Hua Jin asked again. Gong Jia's lips twitched. What do you mean by how do I feel about her? You've always treated her as a good friend. Gong Jia pondered for a moment and then said seriously, rather than calling her a friend, it's better to call her a comrade. Comrade? Revolutionary friendship? Chapter 45-44. Hua Jin sat down opposite him. I think that Alice is quite good. Gong Jia looked at him suspiciously. He didn't understand why he was suddenly telling him this. Hua Jin continued. Alice may sound mean, but she has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Gong Jia tapped the table lightly with his fingers. Do you have something to say? Hua Jin licked his lips. I have a feeling that you have something to say, but you're hesitating. It's like this. Hua Jin took a deep breath and said, I think that you owe her a thank you. Gong Jia was stunned. Do you know why Alice is infertile? Gong Jia suddenly stood up when he heard this. He grabbed his collar and frowned slightly. You know. He had always wondered why Alice would lose her ability to conceive for no reason. However, no matter how he asked Alice, Alice refused to answer. Gong Jia had also secretly investigated this matter. However, there was nothing fishy about Alice's infertility. If Alice was said to be a woman whose private life was more chaotic, then perhaps because she was too indulgent and had too many abortions, or perhaps because she hurt her body because of her promiscuity, then it would be a different story. Although Alice was very good at talking, in fact, her love and private life could be said to be a blank slate. It was impossible to say that she was infertile from birth. But, as for the reason behind it, she had never mentioned it to her brother. Hua Jin knew the reason. Gong Jia couldn't help but feel agitated. He had always been troubled by Alice's infertility. Hua Jin saw that he was so nervous and asked, Are you very concerned about her? Of course. Gong Jia became anxious and asked, Don't you know? Tell me. Because, Hua Jin gulped and asked again, Do you remember that you were infected with the plague when you carried out a mission? Didn't you get infected with the virus? Gong Jia said, Yes. Hua Jin said, At that time, in order to save you, she used her own body as an experimental specimen. Then, she planted the vaccine in her body. To be honest, I don't really understand this issue. However, I heard that he first implanted the virus into his own body and then experimented with the vaccine on her body. Fortunately, the experiment was very successful. However, because of the infection with the vaccine, the virus destroyed many of her body's skills and she also lost her ability to reproduce. Although she won't completely lose her fertility, if she takes the risk of getting pregnant, there's a 99% chance that the fetus will be deformed. Gong Jia listened silently, and his eyes became darker and darker. She did that. She actually did this for him. No wonder. Back then, when he was infected with the virus, a vaccine for the plague that swept the entire impoverished country was immediately available. He only knew that Alice was one of the main researchers for this vaccine. However, he didn't know that she was the one who took the initiative and used her own body as an experiment. After the vaccine was developed, it had to be tested before it could be used. And Alice was willing to use her own body as an experiment for him. Gong Jia immediately let go of Hua Jin's collar and supported himself on the table, somewhat unable to accept this fact. Chapter 45-45. I wanted to say it too, but... Gong Jia turned to look at her. She didn't want you to say it? This stupid woman. Gong Jia punched the table angrily. Who asked her to do this? She did it to save you. She didn't know that she would lose her fertility because of this experiment. After a pause, Hua Jin continued. But I think that if she were to go back and make a choice again, even though she knew that she would lose her fertility, I think she would still do it. Because... Gong Jia's lips curled into a smile. She likes me. You knew? If I didn't know, I wouldn't be Gong Jia. It was just that he had always pretended not to know. He had tried to make it clear, but Alice didn't confess her feelings. He didn't have the right to say that. He even felt that he had gone overboard. Alice didn't express her feelings, but he still had to reject her cruelly. Alice didn't say anything, but she probably knew that he didn't have any feelings for her. In fact, both Alice and Gong Jia were very smart. Smart people could see through each other's feelings from their words and actions. If two people liked each other but didn't confess their feelings, then they must be idiots. But two people who admired each other were probably like magnets. They didn't dare to be separated by anything. Their admiration for each other would bring them closer and closer to each other. And two people who didn't love each other, even if one of them was wishful thinking, the other would only step back and drift further and further away. Hence, Alice could tell that Gong Jia didn't like her. He had already made it very clear. How could she not know what was good for her? Hence, she didn't tell Gong Jia about this because she didn't want this to become a burden for him. Alice had always thought that if Gong Jia was destined to not be her life partner, then she would be his family. She could always protect him. Anyway, love would eventually turn into family. She didn't want to hold him back. When she found out that Gong Jia liked Hua Jin, she was really gloating. This was her little selfishness. If the man she liked didn't like her because he liked other men, then she still had a chance to comfort herself. Gong Jia sat down at the table with a serious expression. She didn't tell me because she didn't want me to be grateful to her. Yes. Hua Jin rested his chin on his hand. She doesn't want you to know, but I feel that she has the responsibility to tell you, and you have the right to know, don't you think? Thank you. After learning the truth from him, Gong Jia finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Alice finished patrolling the corridor outside the ward and returned to the room, she saw only Gong Jia in the room. She was surprised. Where is he? Where did he go? Gong Jia raised his head and looked at her deeply. Come here. Alice walked over with some hesitation. The corners of her lips twitched. Especially when she saw Gong Jia's serious expression, she felt even more uncomfortable. What's wrong? Gong Jia stood up and came close to her. Let me ask you, is it because of me that you lost your ability to conceive? When Alice heard this, she froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. I know everything. If Hua Jin didn't tell me about this, how long did you intend to keep it from me? Chapter 45-46. Alice didn't sound angry. Instead, she sounded powerless and helpless. She had been betrayed by Hua Jin despite trying so hard. She really didn't want Gong Jia to know about this matter. After all, this was a one-sided decision that she had made. Gong Jia wasn't responsible for it. Shouldn't I know the cause and effect of this matter? Gong Jia didn't think much of it. Why did you do that? I don't know. I just did it subconsciously, Alice said. At that time it was also a spur of the moment. So, I want to hear the truth. Because, Alice shrugged and said in a very relaxed tone, because I like you. I like you so much that as long as you're alive, I'm willing to pay any price. She was such a simple-minded person. Liking someone probably meant that she wanted him to be good. Actually, this wasn't selflessness. It was just purely she wanted him to be good. That was all, Alice hurriedly said. I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just didn't want to burden you and make you feel guilty because of this matter. Gong Jia said angrily, do you think I'm worried about you? Or do you think I'll blame myself and feel guilty towards you because of this matter? You won't? Of course not. Alice actually heaved a sigh of relief. That's good then. It's not a big deal anyway. She was finally able to put down the huge rock in her heart. She was really relieved to hear that from her brother. Gong Jia looked at her relieved expression and for some reason, felt tears welling up in his eyes. Earlier on, he had just said those words out of anger. However, he didn't expect that Alice's relieved expression would make him feel bad. Gong Jia took a deep breath and said, this kind of thing can't happen again. Okay. I also hope that there won't be a next time. Although it's not a big deal, it still took half of my life. Gong Jia finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His heart ached so much that he pulled Alice into his embrace. His throat was already slightly hoarse. You should have told me about this earlier. Alice noticed that his shoulders were trembling slightly, and she couldn't bear to see him like this. If I had known that Hua Jin's mouth wouldn't be reliable, forget it. I had originally planned to keep this matter from you even if I were to die. But since you already know, Spilled water could not be retrieved. Alice rubbed the back of his head helplessly. Gongjia, you still blame yourself for this, right? Gongjia did not say anything. Alice asked again. Do you know why I never told you? Gongjia was still speechless. Because, Alice said faintly, I don't want you to treat me as your benefactor and feel grateful and guilty towards me. You should have told me. What's the point of telling you? Alice shrugged. Don't tell me that if I told you my body would return to how it used to be? Or would I let you live the rest of your life with gratitude and guilt towards me? There's no need for that. It's not worth it. It's worth it. His lips curled into a smile. At the very least, I'll know who saved my life. Wow, after hearing that, shouldn't I be a little touched? But, Alice finally couldn't help but say, is this the only time I saved you? Gongjia was speechless. Previously I saved you so many times, but you didn't seem to thank me much. Chapter 45-47. That's different. Alright, I got it. Alice sighed helplessly. If you really want to thank me, please try your best to make yourself happier. Gongjia was stunned. Do you think I'm selfless? Alice snorted mischievously. Of course not. I just hope that you can be happier. At least you can live a peaceful life. Be happy with Huajin. Love life. Love life. At least, don't let me down for saving your life time and time again. When Gongjia heard this, he suddenly laughed helplessly. Finally, he let out a breath that was stuck in his throat. Yes, I will. That's good. Alice asked again. Is there anything else? Gongjia looked at her silently. Alice really couldn't stand his deep gaze. She felt awkward and inexplicably sad. She hurriedly said, if there's nothing else, I'm leaving. With that, she turned around and left the room as if she was fleeing. Until she was far away from the room and in the corridor, she leaned against the wall and heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, her eyes turned red. If she could be more selfish, when Gongjia questioned her about this matter, she would definitely take the opportunity to confess to him. She would say, Gongjia, I like you. I love you. It's because I love you so much that I risked everything to save you, even if I had to sacrifice my fertility. Or rather, Gongjia, since I sacrificed so much to save you, are you going to be responsible for me? She could totally use this matter to ask for a reward. However, she couldn't seem to do it. She couldn't open her mouth. As a doctor, she couldn't make any mistakes during surgery. Even the slightest mistake in the details could lead to unpredictable consequences. It was the same for love. If there was less love, it wouldn't be called love. If it was one-sided love, it wouldn't be called love. She might as well fulfill it. In fact, words like, I'd rather Gongjia like a man than a woman were all against her heart. They were just set for Huajin to hear. But in reality, she knew better than anyone that Gongjia liked Huajin only because Huajin happened to be a man. He did not only like men. She couldn't possibly ask Gongjia to reciprocate her love just because she had sacrificed so much. Being good to a person is voluntary. Similarly, loving a person is voluntary. However, just now when she said, I really love you, he almost said it out loud. Alice tightly covered her mouth. For the first time in her life, the urge to cry overcame her reason, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Huajin happened to pass by and vaguely saw Alice leaning against the wall, covering her mouth and biting her knuckles as if she was crying. He walked over worriedly, but when he got closer, he realized that Alice was really crying. What's wrong? Hearing Huajin's voice, Alice raised her head and glared at him fiercely. She sobbed and said, Huajin, you betrayed me. Huh? Why did you tell Gongjia about that? Alice said angrily, Gongjia knew about this and came looking for me. I was the one who told him. Huajin had a matter-of-fact look on his face. I think he should know about this. He has the right to know. Why can't you tell him? Traitor. Alice was angry when she saw him. Chapter 45-48. Huajin said, You can say whatever you want. Anyway, I think Gongjia has the right to know about this. What about you? Alice suddenly became aggressive. Do you like Gongjia? Huajin suddenly didn't know how to reply. He turned his face away awkwardly. Why are you asking this question? Huajin, do you know that sometimes I really want to beat you up? Oh. You obviously like Gong Jia too, don't you? Hua Jin immediately retorted. When did I? If you don't like him, why did you take such a big risk and come all the way to East Africa to look for him? If you don't like him, why do you blush every time you see Gong Jia? If you don't like him, why can't you sleep well the whole night because you're worried? Who's here for him? Hua Jin felt wronged. I just want to experience what it's like to be a mercenary on a mission. Alice couldn't help but sneer. So how long are you going to say one thing and mean another? How am I saying one thing and mean another? If you continue to say one thing and mean another, I'll really beat you up. Alice said angrily. The one whose favorite is indeed fearless. Have you ever considered my feelings? You clearly know that Gong Jia likes you and you like Gong Jia too. Why can't you just admit it? Is your reputation so precious? Gong Jia can put down his status as the young master of the Gong family to confess his feelings to you. Why don't you admit your feelings? Is it really that difficult for you to admit that you like Gong Jia? With that, Alice curled her lips in self-mockery. Do you know how envious I am of you? You have to know that it's not easy for two people to like each other. Most people, the person they like doesn't like them, and the person they like doesn't like them. They always miss out on love. What about you? Don't wait until you really miss out on love and regret it. What about you? Hua Jin said angrily. Aren't you the same? Don't you like Gong Jia? Why didn't you say a word or tell him? Don't tell me you're just going to watch him pass by? Because he already knows everything. Whether I say it or not, the effect will be the same. Hua Jin said angrily. How would you know if you don't try? What if he likes you a little? There's no need for that. It's different. Even if he knows about it, you didn't tell him about it in front of him. At least, tell him about your feelings. Alice suddenly turned her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. You want me to confess in front of him and be rejected once? That's not what I meant. Or do you want me to beg for his mercy in front of him? Hua Jin was at a loss for words. I didn't. Alice almost exhausted all her strength. It's not a big deal. As long as you work hard, it will be useful. If she didn't like him, she didn't like him. If she didn't love him, she didn't love him. Although no matter what, one had to try their best and struggle a little to know whether there was hope or not. Chu Yunsheng was still in a daze. But this was the only thing that Alice didn't want to struggle with. Her greatest gentleness was not to disturb or force him. Chapter 45-49. Hua Jin looked at Alice in a daze and was silent for a long time. Alice asked, Life is so short. Isn't it a blissful thing to be able to be with someone you like and who likes you back? At the hospital, Yun Shirshir sat on the balcony. After drying the clothes, she leaned against the balcony in a daze. Muyaja walked over and hugged her waist from behind, gently resting his head on her shoulder. What's wrong? What's on your mind? I'm thinking. When will the vaccine be available? Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. It's not like you're just thinking about it. The vaccine will be available for clinical use tomorrow. But I'm still praying silently in my heart. Who are you praying to? Jesus? Or Buddha? Muyaja paused and said, As the saying goes, if you're sincere, it'll happen. If you're not sincere, how can God hear your prayers? Muyaja gently stroked her hair. All right, don't think so much. I'm worried just like you. But worrying is useless. Yun Shirshir was still absent-minded. Muyaja kissed her cheek and hugged her gently. Tomorrow is your birthday. Yun Shirshir finally reacted. My birthday? You were so busy taking care of the little guys that you forgot about your birthday? Yun Shirshir said. How can I be in the mood to celebrate my birthday at this critical juncture? We still have to celebrate your birthday. We don't want to build our happiness on Shaoichen's suffering. Instead, we have to persevere in the face of adversity and hope for life. Muyaja continued. Besides, your birthday is very meaningful. When the time comes, we'll bake a cake and send it to Shaoichen. Although he can't be by your side this year, we have to tell him that we hope that he can be there for your birthday next year, the year after that, and every year after that. Yes. Yun Shirshir nodded. Unknowingly, her face was wet with tears. After returning home from the hospital, because she had not been home for a long time, the whole house was filled with a sense of loneliness. He hadn't come back for a long time. So much so that there wasn't even the slightest trace of life left. Yoon Shirshir hurriedly turned on the lights in all the rooms. The bright light finally brought a trace of vitality to the cold and cheerless home. After Muyaja parked the car, he walked into the house. Looking at the lights in the house, he finally felt a trace of warmth. Usually he had 3 points in one line. Hospital, company, home. Usually Yoon Shirshir would be at the hospital. Usually when he came back from the company, he only used the bedroom. When Yoon Shirshir was not at home, his 3 meals a day were basically settled in the company cafeteria. Both Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shan were a little surprised. Why had boss been going to the company cafeteria every day recently? Isn't sister-in-law cooking at home? Looking at Muyaja's depressed expression, could it be that the two of them had quarreled? That's impossible. They are clearly very loving and respectful to each other. They could vaguely tell that Muyaja had been preoccupied with a lot of things recently. He was a little absent-minded when it came to company matters. However, Muyaja didn't say anything to them. They didn't dare to ask too much. In front of Yoon Shirshir, he was her husband. In front of Yu Yueyao and Xiaoichen, he was a father. It was only in the company that he was a man of flesh and blood. Chapter 45-50. He was also afraid. Guilt seemed to be the last straw, and it was about to crush him. When he thought back to Xiaoichen's childhood, he realized that he was not a good father. He did not care for others, nor did he love others. It was only after he got together with Yoon Shirshir that he learned how to care for and love children. Thanks to Yueyao, he was finally promoted to a qualified stay-at-home father. As for Xiaoichen's childhood, he could no longer make up for it. Xiaoichen was very strong-willed. He was never willing to say anything, but it could be seen that Xiaoichen was very envious of both Yu and Yueyao. It was the kind of envy that came from deep within his bones. However, he had always been so sensible. He was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. With such a pity, Muyaja was worried that he would never have the chance to make up for Xiaoichen. At night, negative emotions came and went as one wished. He had not had a good night's sleep for a long time. Now that he was home, he finally felt a trace of the warmth of home. It more or less dispelled some of the loneliness in his heart. He sat on the sofa and looked in the direction of the living room. He listened to the sound of Yoon Shirshir beating eggs and mixing flour. Yoon Shirshir did not feel very uncomfortable about the cake. However, she had been practicing her baking skills with Yu. She had also improved a little after killing so many people. After a while, she finished mixing the dough and made a cake embryo. Then she put it into the oven. An hour later, the cake embryo was taken out. During this time, Yoon Shirshir had already prepared the condensed milk, mousse, chocolate, Oreo, cookies, and other ingredients. She smoothed the condensed milk and mousse bit by bit. When the final cake was out of the oven, Yoon Shirshir looked at the cake that was pretending to be perfect and called Muyaja over happily. Muyaja walked over and looked at the cake. He was very satisfied. Although my skills have deteriorated a little, it's still considered exquisite. I haven't made it in a long time. I'm indeed a little rusty. Yoon Shirshir dipped the remaining mousse on her finger and brought it to Muyaja's mouth. Here, try it. Muyaja took a bite and licked it. He raised his eyebrows in satisfaction. The taste is not bad. Right. Yoon Shirshir was very pleased. At least this proves that you haven't regressed too much. Where's the packaging? Here. The two of them sealed the cake in a box and put it in the fridge. At night, he would not go to the hospital. Gu Jinglian and Chuho stayed behind to take care of her, while Yoon Shirshir and Muyaja came back to rest for a while. The two families reached an agreement, taking turns to keep watch at night. This way, the pressure on the various families would lessen. Although people could rest in the hospital, they were provided with foldable single beds, which were not comfortable to sleep on. If they did not sleep well, it would affect their condition in all aspects. This was especially true during company meetings. There were several times when Muyaja dozed off in front of several employees. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shan were dumbfounded. When they got home, they took a comfortable hot bath. The two of them hugged each other and lay on the bed, feeling extremely comfortable. After so many days of stressful life, they finally relaxed a little at this moment. Yoon Shirshir lay on Muyaja's chest and asked worriedly, "Will Xiaoichen really be safe?" Muyaja opened his eyes. Actually, he was not sure about this, but I believe that my son is blessed by the heavens. He will definitely be fine. Chapter 45-51. As she spoke, Yoon Shurshur laughed self-deprecatingly. People only realize how precious that person is when they are on the verge of losing them. Thinking back, Xiaoyi-Chen has always been very sensible. That day when he was critically ill, I was waiting outside the door and kept thinking about it. I feel like I owe him too much. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities to make it up to him. I'm just afraid that there won't be any more opportunities. Don't say such things that destroy the morale of our own people. Muyaja paused for a moment and immediately comforted her. The vaccine has already been developed. Don't think too much. Don't let your imagination run wild. Go to bed early. Okay. Yoon Shurshur closed her eyes and lay on his chest. It was rare for her to sleep so peacefully. The next day the sun was shining brightly. The gloomy weather for a few days finally came to an end. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was good. Yoon Shurshur woke up and drew the curtains. Receiving such warm sunlight, the gloominess in her heart finally dissipated a little. Yoon Shurshur woke up early in the morning and was busy in the kitchen. Besides the cake, she also had to prepare some dishes. Muyaja applied for leave and brought the cake to the hospital with Yoon Shurshur. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were a little confused when they saw that they came with a cake. Whose birthday is it? Yu immediately said. Mommy's birthday. I remember. Yao was also beaming with joy. The atmosphere in the hospital was always oppressive. It was rare that Yoon Shurshur's birthday happened, so it seemed to add some joy. Since we're in the hospital this year, we won't hold a grand birthday party. Yoon Shurshur placed the cake on the table and placed the dishes one by one on the table. Chu Ho was very happy. It would be even better if there was wine. Let's drink a few glasses. Muyaja raised his eyebrows. There is. He took out a bottle of champagne from his handbag and even brought a wine glass with him. Even if they were in the hospital, the ceremony of a birthday celebration could not be lacking. Yao lay on the table drooling as she stared at the cake. Suddenly she asked, then what about Xiaoyi-Chen? Can he eat a birthday cake? Cut him a slice first, and when we're done eating, send this slice of cake to the quarantine zone. Oh, Yao's eyelashes drooped in disappointment. Yoon Shurshur immediately guessed what he was thinking. He squatted down and gently scratched her nose. Yao, that won't do. If the cake is sent in, we can't eat it. The quarantine area is a sterile area. There are a lot of bacteria outside, so my brother can't come out to celebrate his birthday with us. Yao said. Then I'll eat less and leave more for my brother. Yao, be good. You don't have to keep it. The cake is very big. I can't eat too much now. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it if I vomit it out. If he vomited, the blood would flow back into the trachea, which could easily endanger his life. Therefore, he had to rely on liquid food for now. He could only eat a little of the cake. A few mouthfuls would be bad enough. Yao nodded sensibly. Then I'll wish Mommy a happy birthday on behalf of my brother. Yoon Shurshur was so touched that she kissed her. Yu walked over and gave Yoon Shurshur a big hug. Mommy, happy birthday. I wish that you'll always be 18. Thank you, Yu. Yoon Shurshur kissed Yu. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho gave their blessings one by one. Because of this accident, the relationship between the two families became much better than before. Especially Muyaja and Gu Jinglian, who even knew how to tease each other. Chapter 45-52. Chu Ho inserted candles into the cake. The candles were shaped like numbers, and Gu Jinglian drew the curtains in the ward. The moment he lit the candles, the faint light reflected on Yoon Shurshur's face, and her gaze was gentle. Chu Ho said, Shurshur, hurry up and make a wish. Okay. She had already thought of the wish countless times. Yoon Shurshur closed her eyes, and a strong wish surfaced in her mind. She wished that Xiaoyi-Chen would not miss her birthday again. This wish did not ask for much, but could it come true? Yoon Shurshur made the wish sincerely and gently blew out the candles. Chu Ho passed the knife to her. Yoon Shurshur cut a piece of cake and put it aside. This piece was for Xiaoyi-Chen. She also cut another piece and put it together with Xiaoyi-Chen. Chu Ho was a little surprised. Who is this for? Have you forgotten? And your Xiao Bao? Not a single one of them can be missing. Chu Ho came back to his senses. So you haven't forgotten about Xiao Bao. He had originally thought that Yun Shirshir had probably forgotten about Xiaoichen because she had been thinking about Xiao Bao. Chu Ho had originally felt that it was a pity that Xiao Bao would not be able to eat the cake because he was also in the quarantine zone. He had not expected that Yun Shirshir would still be thinking about him. This is for Xiaoichen and Xiao Bao. Later, after we finish eating, we'll send the cake to them. Okay. We can't forget about them. After dividing the cake evenly, Yu took a portion for Yue Yao and another for Jing Yang. The little guy was eating with relish. Although cake was not a rare thing, and the little lads had been living in good condition since they were young, they were sick of eating all kinds of cakes. However, in such an environment, staying in the hospital for so many years, they had to eat nutritious meals. It was rare to have cake in such a boring diet, so it was considered a novelty. Yu even felt that this cake was the best thing he had ever eaten in the world. Yu raised the cake and asked, "Mommy, did you make this cake?" "Yes." "Wow." Yu looked at her with admiration. "This cake is probably the best thing I've eaten since I came to this world." Yun Shirshir. Mu Yaja could not help but say, "Is it? I feel that my cooking skills haven't changed. You've been eating nutritious meals in the hospital all this time. It's a rare occasion you get to eat cake, so you think it's delicious." Upon hearing this, Yu thought about it for a while. Then he complained to Yun Shirshir. "Mommy, Daddy said that your cake tastes awful." Mu Yaja resisted the urge to hit him. "Did I say that? You're trying to drive a wedge between us." "That's right." Yu said eloquently. "I said that Mommy's cake is delicious, but Daddy said that I've been eating too much nutritious meals in the hospital, and that's why I've lost my sense of taste." Yun Shirshir looked at Mu Yaja meaningfully. Mu Yaja explained, "That's not what I meant. But it sounds like that to me." Chu Ho's tone was as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Mu Yaja opened his mouth but could not say a word. Gu Jinglian also nodded seriously. "Don't explain. Any explanation is a cover-up." As Yueyao ate the cake, Musi's mouth was full, but he still nagged. "If Daddy doesn't like Mommy's cake, then Daddy shouldn't eat it." Chapter 45-53. Yueyao was not angry. Instead, she enjoyed Mu Yaja feeding her personally. Yu was amused by Yueyao. "Haha, it's best that Daddy doesn't eat. This way Yueyao can eat more, right?" Yueyao finished a piece of cake in the blink of an eye. Then she turned to look at Mu Yaja and opened her mouth wide again. Everyone couldn't help but think of a baby bird waiting to be fed. They straightened their necks and opened their mouths wide, waiting for their mother to feed them. Mu Yaja patiently fed her a small piece of cake. "Delicious." Yuyao happily swayed her head from side to side as she ate the delicious cake. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but smile. Gu Jinglian's eyes were fixed on her. Chu Ho saw him staring blankly and couldn't help but nudge him on the shoulder. "Why are you staring at someone else's daughter?" Mu Yaja was shocked when he heard this. He quickly shielded his precious Yueyao and looked at Gu Jinglian warily. "What are you doing?" Gu Jinglian was caught red-handed and turned his handsome face away awkwardly. Chu Ho laughed. "I think someone is envious. Envious of having a little princess." Yun Shirshir was surprised. "Hey, didn't you have twins? Jinglian, where's your Qianqian?" At the mention of Qianqian, Gu Jinglian's usually arrogant face was filled with disappointment. Chu Ho laughed even harder when he heard this. "Qianqian is not close to him." "Not close." Yun Shirshir looked at Gu Jinglian, who was secretly sulking in surprise. She then turned to look at the father and daughter, who were snuggling happily in Mu Yaja's arms. She could not believe it. This daughter must be the closest to her father. As soon as she said this, the atmosphere in Gu Jinglian's corner became even gloomier. He took a bite of the cake and said nothing. Chu Ho said helplessly, "Logically speaking, that's what they said. However, Qianqian has also grown up a lot. She can call her mother, brother, and Uncle Fu. She can recognize everyone except for Jing Lian. She cries for me to carry her as if Jing Lian is a demon king." Yun Shirshir's mouth twitched when she heard that. Wasn't that right? Wasn't Gu Jinglian the great demon king himself? Could it be that his killing intent was too strong? After all, in the past, a simple stomp of the Gu family's feet could cause a bloodbath. Gu Jinglian was ruthless. It was said that the more powerful a person was, the more murderous he would be. Children, on the other hand, were very intelligent. Normally, when they saw someone with a strong murderous aura, they would cry out of instinct. No wonder Qianqian was no longer close to Gu Jinglian. Yun Shishir only comforted her. Jinglian, it's okay. The child is still young. When he grows up, he'll naturally be closer to you. Gu Jinglian didn't know if he should nod or sigh. He asked, was Yueyao close to his father since he was young? That's different. How is it different? Yueyao was taken care of by Yaja since he was young. At that time, I was not in good health after giving birth and he couldn't bear for me to tire myself out. He did everything personally for Yueyao, including breastfeeding him. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he said indignantly, haven't I done enough personally? Chuho said, did you take care of the two little guys as well as I did? I cried whenever I got close to them. I couldn't help it. This means that they're afraid of you. Haha, there's no choice. Your daughter isn't close to you. Gu Jinglian was furious. That might not be the case when she grows up. Maybe when she grows up she'll still be close to me. Just like Yueyao, she's closest to her father. Chapter 45-54. Yu proudly hugged Yueyao's shoulders. I'm the one closest to Yueyao. Yueyao likes me the most, right? Yueyao's innocent eyes darted around, and she immediately slapped her face. No. Yu was speechless. Everyone laughed. Ha 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 ha. Yu felt a little wronged. She reached out and pinched Yueyao's face. She was angry at her heartlessness, but she couldn't bear to hit her too hard. She only asked eagerly, didn't you say that you like Big Brother the most? Not anymore. As Yueyao spoke, she looked at Jingyang and said in a childish voice, I like Big Brother Yangyang the most now. Yu looked at Jingyang resentfully. Indeed, during her stay in the hospital, Yueyao and Jingyang's relationship was the best. It was so good that it angered both humans and gods. He had been jealous more than once, but because of Xiaoyichen, he had been very worried and neglected to take care of Yueyao. Because Big Brother Yangyang plays with me, Yueyao said, I like to play with Big Brother Yangyang the most. Feeling the sharp stab in his back from Yu's angry glare, Jingyang was so scared that he buried his head and ate the cake. He acted as if he was an outsider who didn't know anything and looked innocent. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed even more unbridled. No matter who it was, even Yun Shishir, it was rare to see Yu get snubbed like this. Moreover, it was at the hands of Yueyao. However, even so, Yu still couldn't bear to be angry at Yueyao. She looked at Jingyang with hostility, but when her gaze returned to the back of Yueyao's head, it was full of tenderness. He gently rubbed Yueyao's black hair and said dotingly, anyway, no matter who Yueyao likes the most, I will always dote on Yueyao the most. Brother Ichen dotes on Yue too. Yueyao pouted. At the mention of Xiaoyichen, she felt a little disappointed. Yueyao, when will you be able to see Big Brother? Yueyao misses him so much. Although her tone was full of dejection and grievance, she did not stop eating the cake. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at Yueyao, who was happily eating the cake but was also worried about Xiaoyichen. For a moment, they didn't know whether to feel sad or laugh. Yu comforted her. Brother Ichen will recover soon. Really? Yueyao's eyes sparkled when she heard this. She bit on her cake spoon and looked up at Yu. What about us? Are we almost done? You'll be fine if you eat more. All right. When she heard that she would be fine after eating more cake, Yueyao ate even more happily. Yun Shishir was a little worried. Will you gain weight if you eat like this? After all, there was so much sugar and calories in the cake. Yueyao had standard baby fat. Her face was chubby, and with a pinch all her fingers could pinch was meat. It was soft and tender, but there was no meat on her body. Her stomach, however, would bulge like a little ball every time she finished eating. Yu hugged Yueyao lovingly. Such a small glutinous ball even had a strong milky fragrance on her body. He had a feeling that this little sister was made of milk. She had clearly been weaned for a long time, but the milky fragrance on her body was still there. Everyone looked at each other and sighed. Only 2 people were missing from such a joyous and harmonious scene. The 2 cakes were carefully kept and sent to the quarantine area by the nurse. Chapter 45-55. Eh? A cake? Xiaobao asked the nurse. Whose birthday is it? Muichen's mother. It's her birthday today. So she said that she can't leave you guys behind. Xiao Bao was a little envious when he heard that. How nice. We can celebrate our birthdays together. The nurse squatted by the bed and comforted him. Eat this cake and get better quickly. Then you can leave this place quickly. Okay. Thank you, Auntie Nurse. When the cake was sent to Xiaoichen's ward, Xiaoichen had just finished his drip. When he saw the cake, he immediately remembered that it was Yun Shishir's birthday today. He had been isolated all this time, so he didn't know that the date outside had changed. The concept of time had been deeply blurred because he was isolated from the world. It was a little regretful. He couldn't accompany his mommy and sing her a happy birthday song on her birthday this year. When will I recover? He was really tired of this place. Xiaoichen was vexed. Back then, when he found out that his illness had worsened, he didn't think much of it. He felt that no matter what, he would be able to turn danger into safety. He was never afraid of death. It was also because of this courage that he didn't take the flu to heart. However, he didn't expect that because of this carelessness, he would become the one with the most serious illness. He had been on the verge of death several times. Until now it was like a nightmare. He wasn't afraid of death. He was only afraid of separation. The nurse said, "Your mommy asked me to pass on a message to you." When Xiaoichen heard that his mommy had something to tell him, he sat up excitedly. "What did mommy say to me?" She said. I'll tell you after you finish eating the cake." Xiaoichen pouted and said coquettishly, "Nurse, tell me first. Don't bargain with me. This is a cake that your mommy personally made. Why? Don't you want to eat it? If you don't want to eat it, can you give it to me?" "No." Xiaoichen protected the cake that Yun Shishir had personally made. "Anyway, you can't eat this cake. Don't threaten me." "Alright, I'll eat it. Don't eat too much. It's too sweet. It won't be good if you spit it out." "Yes." Xiaoichen obediently picked up the spoon and took a bite of the cake. The cake was sticky, sweet, and mousse, but she didn't feel sick of it at all. Just the right amount of sweetness. It was so delicious that he wolfed it down. "Eat slowly." The nurse's heart ached as she watched him eat the cake. She couldn't help but say, "Your mommy said she misses you a lot." Xiaoichen paused for a moment, and a teardrop fell onto the dining table. He closed his mouth tightly, trying to hold it in, but failed. He carelessly wiped the corners of his eyes. In an instant, his eyes were wet. Because he rubbed them, they were red and swollen. Against his pale skin, it made people's hearts ache. "I miss mommy too. So, you have to pull yourself together. Your mommy made a wish today, and it must be for you." Wishes couldn't be spoken out loud, otherwise they wouldn't come true. However, everyone knew who the main character of this wish was. Yun Shishir's wish must have been for Xiaoichen. She hoped that he would get better soon. Xiaoichen finished all the cake. Actually, he didn't like to eat sweets, but because it was Yun Shishir's birthday and she had personally made the cake, he decided to eat it. Chapter 45-56. At the same time, East Africa. Due to the war, it was extremely difficult to find the only remaining shop. However, Alice managed to find it. Next to the hospital, there was a very dilapidated dessert shop. There was also a display cabinet selling cakes. However, the conditions were limited. The surface of the cake inside looked like it was smeared with very cheap cream. There were many places that had not been smoothed, and the appearance was not exquisite enough. However, it was not easy for her to find this shop in such a remote corner beside the hospital. There was probably a market further away. However, due to the conditions in East Africa and the recent invasion of war, there were refugees everywhere. Many shops that were lucky enough to escape the war had been smashed and robbed by the refugees. A cake like this was not cheap. It actually cost dozens of US dollars. Due to the war, the country's currency had been devalued. Only US dollars were allowed to circulate in the market. Alice bought the cake back. When Hua Jin saw that she had bought the cake, he found it a little strange. "Where did you buy the cake from?" "A shop in a remote corner beside the hospital." A remote corner. He had already said that it was a remote corner. But she had still managed to find it. Alice paused and said, "Luckily, it's a remote corner, so it hasn't been robbed clean by the refugees. Many conspicuous shops beside the hospital have been robbed and closed. This place is remote, so it's still open." "Oh, It's Xiao Jie's birthday today. Have you prepared a gift? Hua Jin frowned. I have prepared it. What gift? It's a secret. Hua Jin glanced at her coldly. I can't tell you. Why? It's not a gift for you. Why are you so agitated? When Alice heard this, she also asked for a snub and whistled. It must be some shameful gift. With that, she carried the cake in. In the ward, Gong Jia was leaning against the window and drinking coffee. When he saw Alice carrying the cake in, his eyes widened in shock. Previously, Alice had told her that she was going to buy him a cake. Gong Jia was worried that she might be in danger. Alice even joked that she wasn't on the wanted list. She wasn't him, so why would she be in danger? Gong Jia did not think much of it. Although Alice wasn't on the wanted list, she was still a member of the Hurricanes. Even the FBI knew her. In addition, at this time there were ruins everywhere. Why would they go to the ruins to find a cake shop? It was simply wishful thinking. He didn't expect that she would really buy the cake back. Unbelievable. This woman was simply omnipotent. Ever since you were young, you could lack anything on your birthday except for cake. Gong Jia was surprised and touched by Alice's kindness. It was so dangerous, but she still insisted on buying him a cake. Cake wasn't a tradition of the Gong family. It was just that after he was young, when he celebrated his birthday with his elder sister, the most important ceremony was to have a cake. Gong Jia was a very ritualistic person. Every birthday, Mu Qingcheng would buy them a birthday cake. Although the cake was sometimes big and sometimes small and not enough for 3 people, it was essential to have a cake on a birthday. Chapter 45-57. When it was his birthday, Gong Jia was inexplicably unhappy when he saw that there was no cake. He kept feeling that something was missing. It was as if without the cake, he felt that the birthday was missing a little bit. Every time he saw the cake, he would think of Mu Qingcheng and Yun Shishir. In this way, even if it was his birthday alone, he wouldn't feel lonely. However, without the cake, he would feel that he was really alone on his birthday. It was also from that time that Alice really realized that on her birthday, she couldn't lack anything but cake. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tried so hard to find a cake everywhere. In the end, he really found it. Maybe the taste is limited, but I've seen the production environment. It's quite clean. Gong Jia walked to the table and opened the box personally. A cake that wasn't considered round greeted his eyes. There was nothing new about the production. In China, it was the original appearance of a cake from the 60s or 70s. The cake's cream was mixed with cheap coloring. The wavy pattern was written in English. Happy birthday. The font was crooked and not exquisite at all. Happy birthday. Alice smiled at him. Gong Jia smiled and gently hugged the back of her neck. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. Thank you. Hua Jin said. That? Gong Jia turned to look at him. What? Happy birthday to you. Gong Jia paused and suddenly thought of something. Then where's the gift that you prepared? Hua Jin inexplicably looked a little guilty. I'll give it to you later. What gift? You're being so mysterious. Gong Jia didn't probe further. He casually dipped his finger in some cream and put it into his mouth. It was unexpectedly delicious. It's so sweet. Although it was cheap coloring, the cream was actually not bad. The point was, in a background like East Africa, the food had always been bad. The cake placed here was already considered a luxury. Hua Jin also took a bite. His appetite wasn't as picky as Gong Jia's, but he felt that the cake wasn't delicious. He didn't like cream. This year only Hua Jin and I will celebrate your birthday with you. Alice looked at the cake again. But we were lucky. No matter what, we still found the cake. She actually still remembered. He couldn't live without a cake on his birthday. Gong Jia was a little touched. He pursed his lips and prepared to cut the cake. Hua Jin stopped him. Aren't you going to light a candle and make a wish? Alice chimed in. Yeah, make a wish. Little Jia, make a wish. I don't know what to wish for. Think about it. As Alice spoke, she took out the only candle that the boss had given her and lit it. In the dim candlelight, Gong Jia closed his eyes and made a perfunctory wish. This year's birthday wish is. Hua Jin and Alice looked at him seriously. Gong Jia said, World peace. Hua Jin. Alice was speechless. The two of them tacitly fell silent. World peace. Who was he kidding? They didn't know why, but when this wish came out of Gong Jie's mouth it didn't sound convincing at all. Hua Jin muttered. With you around the world won't be peaceful. Gong Jie glanced at him coldly. He casually dipped some cream in it and forced it into his mouth. Eat your cake. Chapter 45-58. He was the biggest obstacle to world peace, okay? 70% of the world's wars were caused by hurricanes. How dare he wish for world peace? When Gong Jie heard this, he glared at him fiercely. Hua Jin suddenly felt guilty and cowered. He quickly raised his wine glass and toasted him. Cheers! That sincere expression of his seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. Gong Jie did not stoop to his level. Alice also poured a glass of wine and clinked it with his. Xiao Jie, I'll toast to you. Okay. Unknowingly, half a round of drinking had passed. Alice and Gong Jie had good alcohol tolerance, but tonight the two of them had finished 12 bottles of champagne. Whether it was Gong Jie or Alice, they were both a little drunk. In the end, they were no longer drinking for the sake of drinking, but for the sake of their lives. Gong Jie was still a little sober, but Alice was already beyond drunk. She pointed at Gong Jie, wanting to take advantage of the night to compete with him. Hua Jin could not help her up, so he had no choice but to contact other people. Only then did they drag Alice away. When he returned to the room, he saw Gong Jie leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window with his head leaning weakly against the window. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hua Jin walk in, but he did not move. It could be seen that he had drunk a lot, so much so that he was dizzy. His whole body was limp and weak like a large doll lying limp by the window. Hua Jin walked over and stretched out his hand, wanting to help him to the bed. However, Gong Jie suddenly looked at him childishly, spread his hands and pursed his lips. He actually had a hint of coquettishness. What? Where's my present? Gong Jie said eloquently. It's my birthday today, and you didn't prepare a present for me? What present do you want? I don't care, I want a present. Gong Jie began to lose his temper. If you don't give me a present, I won't remember. All right, I'll give you a present. Get up first. Hua Jin was half joking and half fawning. His strength was limited, and drunken people were always scoundrels, so he couldn't do anything to him. Thus, in desperation, Hua Jin tempted him with a birthday present. If you lie down on the bed obediently, I'll give you the birthday present I prepared. When Gong Jie heard this, he smiled meaningfully. You're lying. Oh. You didn't prepare a gift for me at all. Gong Jie was suddenly very angry. You don't even know my birthday. How is that possible? Of course I know your birthday. He always remembered Yun Shishi's birthday, and Yun Shishi's birthday was naturally Gong Jie's birthday. He wouldn't make a mistake. He had always remembered Gong Jie's birthday. I promise you, as long as you lie down on the bed, I'll give you your birthday present. When Gong Jie heard this, he really stood up obediently. With Hua Jin's support, he finally walked to the side of the bed and sat down heavily. The soft bed collapsed slightly. The moment Gong Jie lay down on the bed, he hooked his long arm around Hua Jin's neck and pulled him into his embrace. Hua Jin lifted his head from his chest and glared at him angrily. However, he saw him cupping his face and asking seriously, "Where's the present?" God knew how much he couldn't wait to see his present. Chapter 45-59. Look carefully, the gift you want is right here. With that, Hua Jin cupped the man's face in his hands and pressed his lips against the latter's. The sudden kiss made Gong Jie, whose mind was in a mess because of the alcohol, even more dizzy. Originally, he had drunk a few more bottles out of excitement that night, and his whole body was dizzy. Hua Jin's kiss had really wiped out his last bit of rationality. Hua Jin. He actually took the initiative to kiss him. Was his so-called gift referring to this kiss? Or Gong Jie had no time to think. Almost instinctively, he flipped over and easily pinned him under his body. Pinning the man's hands to the side of the pillow, Gong Jie lowered his head and took the initiative to kiss the other aggressively. Hua Jin's breathing quickened. Only God knew how difficult it was for him to take this step. Ever since Alice said those words to him the day before, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He had always thought that Gong Jie's so-called liking for him was actually just a moment of interest. Most of the liking had nothing to do with love. It was only because of loneliness, because of the desire for warmth, because of a moment of interest. However, after the interest, one would realize that one didn't really like the other person that much. Many feelings were often just the product of loneliness. Hua Jin had always been worried that if Gong Jie knew about Alice's matter, would Gong Jie push him away and be with her because of his guilt towards Alice? However, due to a freak combination of factors, Gong Jie and Alice's attitudes the last time had already made it clear that their friendship would not change. Alice had also told him that it wasn't easy for two people to like each other. Therefore, he had to cherish it all the more. Hua Jin thought that this was why he had to take the initiative to take this step. Therefore, he used this kiss to express his determination. It was he liked Gong Jie. He didn't want to deny it anymore. This feeling had already existed since the first time they played dare, when their lips touched through a piece of tissue. His feelings for her were definitely not just a moment of interest. However, at that time he didn't think much of this feeling. He didn't think it was out of love and affection, therefore. He suppressed himself again and again, but he didn't expect that unknowingly, he had already fallen deeply. Liking someone was something that couldn't be suppressed, especially when the other party also liked him. The more he felt suppressed, the more painful it was. If Gong Jie didn't like him, it would be fine. However, Gong Jie also liked him. Since both of them liked each other, then, let's be together. Don't care about the uncertain future, or whether they could walk to the end. Love was in the present. At the thought of this, Hua Jin gently hugged the back of Gong Jie's neck and responded to his kiss even more deeply. Unknowingly, half of the shirt on his body had already been taken off. Similarly, Hua Jin followed suit and removed the man's clothes. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie's strong shoulders were exposed to the air. For some reason, Hua Jin was so nervous about what was going to happen next that his heart almost jumped out of his throat. Chapter 45-60. Gong Jie suddenly lowered his head and whispered into his ear. There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time. What? I want. Gong Jie gently lifted his chin and kissed him gently. I want you. This impulse had been brewing for a long time. Hua Jin was slightly startled. However, because of his frantic kisses, he could no longer think independently. The night was dreary. In the room it was charming and gentle. When Hua Jin woke up again, the sky was dark as ink. Beside him, he could hear Gong Jie's heavy breathing. He drank too much. It was lucky that he did not vomit. When he wanted him, he did not know the main points and did not know how to do it. He hurt him several times. It was like the end of the war. Other than enjoyment, it was more for him to vent the emotions that he had been suppressing. His suppression, Gong Jie's suppression, in the end, turned into energy that filled his body and was injected into the other party's body. When Hua Jin opened his eyes, he felt as if his whole body was filled with cement. He was stiff and could not move. Even when he raised his hand, he felt that his arm was extremely heavy. So thirsty for water. He felt as if the blood in his body had solidified. After much effort, he finally supported his body and got up from the bed. He turned over and got off the bed. When his toes touched the ground, it was as if there was an electric current flowing through his waist. He staggered, his legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Hiss! It was so painful. Why did it feel as if his waist had collapsed? It was sore and painful. Most importantly, his tailbone in particular was extremely sore. Hua Jin wanted to cry but had no tears. He supported himself on the bed and stood up with difficulty. He walked to the table but could not find water. He walked weakly to the cabinet and poured some cold water. He gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to finally relieve his thirst. He held the glass of water and walked to the window. Through the window he looked not far away. Even though it was far away, he could vaguely see the ruins filled with smoke. Wreckage was everywhere, as if it was the scene after the apocalypse. The whole of East Africa felt like it was the end of the world. Behind him there was the sound of Gong Jie turning over. Hua Jin turned around and saw that Gong Jie had turned over and fallen asleep again. He walked over to the bed and squatted down. The smell of alcohol from his breath immediately assaulted his nostrils. She didn't know what he was drinking. Hua Jin clearly hated the smell of alcohol, but the smell of alcohol on his body had a kind of orchid fragrance. He gently touched his face. He always felt that such a face, if placed in the past, would have been unreachable. It was within sight but unattainable. He always felt that he and Gongjia were people from two different worlds. Therefore, even if he liked her, even if he adored her, he would always carefully maintain a distance from her, not daring to get close. However, the more he suppressed it, the more painful it was. On the contrary, he was envious of Gongjia. He liked someone and loved someone, and he was so open about it. He still remembered that he grabbed him by the collar and said to him, "Let's be together." There was no hesitation at all, no overcautious. There was no turning back. Hua Jin was envious of this carefree attitude. Now, he also tried to be carefree for once. The moment he poured out the feelings that he had been suppressing, his whole body felt much more relaxed. Chapter 4561. 3 days later. Yun Shishir, who had been waiting in the ward, finally received the good news. The first batch of the vaccine had been successfully tested. Xiaoi Chen was in the second batch of patients to receive the vaccine. She had heard the news from Chu Ho. During this period, Chu Ho had been following the news closely. Finally, after hundreds of trials, the vaccine had been successfully tested. Yun Shishir could not contain her excitement when she heard the news. Yu Yu was also in the ward. She had just taken her medicine and was a little drowsy. When she heard Chu Ho's words, she immediately sat up in bed. "Really?" Chu Ho nodded. "Yes, it's true. I've confirmed it repeatedly. If there are no accidents, the vaccination will start tomorrow. Xiao Bao is in the first batch, and Xiaoi Chen is in the second batch." "Really? That's great." She held Chu Ho's hand tightly. She was so excited that her whole body was trembling. "Shishir, you can rest assured now. The doctor said that if the vaccination is successful, Xiaoi Chen and Xiao Bao should be able to leave the quarantine zone very soon." Yun Shishir nodded. "However, because they are in the second batch, we don't know if there are any side effects." Yun Shishir's expression became serious when she heard this. Chu Ho said anxiously, "I've done some research before. Before this, SARS, which is similar to the influenza this time, had wreaked havoc all over the world. However, after the vaccine was tested, although the patients recovered and were discharged from the hospital, because of the vaccine and the ferocity of SARS at that time, after the patients were discharged from the hospital, the side effects gradually appeared. At that time, due to the large use of hormones to suppress the disease, steroid drugs were used in large quantities for emergency treatment. The side effects of the hormones caused some of the patients' femoral head necrosis, diffuse interstitial fibrosis of the respiratory system, and ischemic lesions and necrosis of the femoral head of the motor system. Even though they were saved from the disease, they spent the rest of their lives in pain. Yu Yu took a deep breath when she heard this. As long as he survives, everything will be fine. No matter what pain there is in the future, I will accompany him through it. At most, I'll take care of him." He paused for a moment and continued, "However, this influenza is different from SARS. I've done my research on Xiaoi Chen's treatment plan. I've also analyzed the ingredients of the vaccine this time. There are no harmful ingredients in it. If you really want to list the side effects, it's probably that you'll lose a lot of weight for a long period of time. You'll lose a lot of nutrients because of your body's consumption." Yu Yu spoke with fervor and assurance as he analyzed the situation logically. Chu He was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly at Yun Shishir and asked in disbelief, "How old is Yu Yu?" 11 years old. Chu Ho was even more amazed. When she thought about Xiao Bao, who was about the same age as Yu Yu, she realized that there would be no harm if there was no comparison. How did she raise a landlord's foolish son, while other people's sons were so smart? Anyway, as long as this vaccine can cure Xiaoi Chen, I don't care about anything else. Yu Yu paused for a moment and said, "Even if his body is damaged because of the influenza, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life." Yun Shishir hugged Yu Yu and kissed his forehead gently. "Yu Yu, good boy. Didn't you say that you've studied the ingredients and that there aren't many side effects?" Chapter 4562. Yes, but it's impossible to be foolproof. Even if there are any side effects, Xiaoi Chen still has us. Yun Shishir was worried when she heard this. However, the vaccine was the best solution so far. Yu Yu comforted her. "Mommy, don't worry. Although this is the first batch of the vaccine, we've already done a lot of safety testing. Moreover, the vaccine has been strengthened. We've refined the best parts and removed the dangerous parts. All in all, the vaccine is quite safe. Okay, that's good. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. The vaccine had already passed the phase I clinical trial and Xiao Bao was in the first batch to receive the vaccine. After the vaccination, after 48 hours of observation, the flu symptoms were significantly reduced. After the blood test, the virus was quickly brought under control. Xiaoyichen was also in the second batch to receive the vaccine. The surprising thing was that the vaccine seemed to have an amazing effect on Xiaoyichen. That night, his fever suddenly went down. From the blood test results, his symptoms were obviously recovering faster than the other patients in the same batch. Unbelievable! The doctors were all amazed. Xiaoyichen was really a miraculous child. His illness worsened the fastest and he recovered the fastest after the vaccination. Moreover, after a few days of observation, the vaccine did not have any side effects on his body. The other patients had a strong reaction. Other than vomiting violently and having a high fever, some of the more serious cases even reported that they had lost their sight. 3 days after the vaccination, Xiao Bao also had a reaction. He suddenly had tinnitus. Although it recovered quickly, his immune cells plummeted. In other words, his immune system would become very weak for a period of time. The vaccine killed the bad virus and eliminated the good bacteria. In fact, the adaptability of the vaccine varied from person to person. It had to be said that Xiaoyichen was the chosen one. He was one of the lucky ones. The vaccine did not react at all on him. Xiaoyichen's illness was obviously more serious than Xiao Bao's, but Xiaoyichen was the one who recovered the fastest. He was also one of the first people to leave the quarantine zone. That day, Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja were at the quarantine area's entrance early in the morning, wearing heavy protective suits. Xiaoyichen was also wearing a thick mask as he lay on the bed. The nurse carefully moved him out of the room. Several attending physicians and vaccine clinical professors were especially excited. They personally sent him off and lit up the fireworks. The moment Xiaoyichen stepped out of the quarantine zone, he sat up excitedly on his bed. He looked around as if he was anxiously looking for someone until he saw Yun Shishir in the crowd. His eyes flashed fiercely and he stretched out his arms like a spoiled child, asking for a hug from her. When Yun Shishir saw this, she recklessly rushed out of the crowd to his bedside and hugged him tightly. This hug transcended life and death. It was truly the joy of surviving a calamity. Mommy! It was rare for Xiaoyichen to act like a spoiled child in front of her. Yun Shishir was inexplicably touched. He intimately rubbed against her in her arms. They had not seen each other for so long. A hug could not dispel the longing he had for her for so long. Chapter 45-63. Yun Shishir couldn't bear to let go of him either. The mother and son hugged each other tightly. They wished that time would stop and stop flowing. The doctors and nurses who were standing at the side were moved. One of the professors said emotionally, "Muichen is so capable." He was in the second batch to be vaccinated, but he was the first to leave the quarantine zone. There were adults who were infected with the flu and they were in good health. However, Xiaoyichen was the first to leave the quarantine zone. It was a memorable moment. It was a historic moment. Xiaoyichen was the first person in the capital to overcome the flu. Hence, the professors and doctors were celebrating excitedly. Yun Shishir couldn't take in any of it. She only knew that she could finally hug Xiaoyichen again. She had been thinking about it day and night, and finally she wasn't disappointed. "Where's Yu?" Xiaoyichen suddenly asked in her arms. Yun Shishir wiped her tears and quietly turned to the side when she heard this. "Over there." Xiaoyichen followed Yun Shishir's gaze and saw Yu holding Mu Yaja's hand. They stood beside him and quietly looked in his direction. "Go ahead." Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two little guys looking at each other. "Do you want to give Xiaoyichen a hug?" "Who wants to hug him?" Yu pouted and complained. "He made me wait for so long and he came out so late. Who wants to hug him?" Mu Yaja smiled knowingly when he heard this. This little guy was still so duplicitous even at this moment. God knew how hard it had been for him to fall asleep last night when he found out that Xiaoyichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day. He couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Although Xiaoyichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day, Yu was worried that something unexpected might happen. Perhaps his condition would worsen overnight. He appeared to be very indifferent, but in fact, he was more anxious and impatient than anyone else. Muyaja had no choice but to gently push him from behind. Yu was caught off guard and stumbled a few steps back. He turned around and looked at his daddy with disdain. Go. Give your brother a hug as a celebration for him. Yu hesitated for a moment before she turned around and walked towards Xiaoyichen. Xiaoyichen quietly watched him walk towards him. He couldn't help but reach out his hands and look at him expectantly. Yu looked at his expectant expression. For some reason, she felt a lump in her throat and her eyes turned red. She took a few steps forward and threw herself into Xiaoyichen's arms, hugging his shoulders tightly. Xiaoyichen. Yu pretended to be calm. He gritted his teeth, but he couldn't hide his sobs. He forced out a few words. Welcome back. Xiaoyichen was so touched that his eyes turned into crescents. Although he was smiling, tears streamed down his face. I'm home, Yu. Yu. Muichin bit his lip. He couldn't hold back the second half of his sentence. I missed you. Did you miss me? Yu nodded gently and said in a choked voice. Yes, I missed you so much. How rare. Yun Shirshir and Muyaja couldn't help but feel emotional. Yu, who had always been arrogant, had finally said, I missed you. Chapter 45-64. Yun Shirshir was so touched that she wiped away her tears. Because of this new lease on life, she thought that she would cherish the happiness of her family of 6 even more in the future. Wealth and power were another matter altogether. Only a healthy and safe life was the most important. Yu and Muichin hugged each other tightly. The two of them turned their heads at the same time and glanced at Yun Shirshir and Muyaja. Muyaja and Yun Shirshir walked over and hugged Xiaoyichen and Yu gratefully. The four of them hugged each other tightly, and no one could bear to let go. In the ward, Yueyao held a bouquet of flowers and waited eagerly at the door. She woke up very early in the morning. Yun Shirshir had already told her that Xiaoyichen would be returning to the ward this morning, and she would bring Yu to welcome him. Yueyao wanted to go as well, but she was too young, and her immunity was not as high as an adult's. Although the vaccine had been developed, Yueyao still tried her best to avoid going near the quarantine zone with her physical fitness. Hence, under Yun Shirshir's repeated coaxing, Yueyao obediently stayed in the ward and waited eagerly for Xiaoyichen's return. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps came from outside the door. Yueyao's ears were sharp, and she immediately heard it. She walked to the door excitedly. If she were a little puppy now, her tail would be wagging excitedly. The door finally opened. Yueyao was about to go up to welcome him when she saw Chuho push the door open and walk in. When he saw Yueyao standing at the door like a puppy holding a bouquet of flowers, he was dumbfounded. Yueyao immediately wilted when she saw Chuho. What? I thought Brother Ichin was back. Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He walked over and picked Yueyao up. What's wrong, little Yueyao? Are you waiting for Xiaoyichen? Yes. Mommy said that Brother Ichin is coming back today. When Yueyao mentioned Xiaoyichen, her face flushed red. She was obviously very happy. Chuho lovingly scratched the bridge of her nose. Sometimes the more he looked at Yueyao, the more he liked her. She thought that it would be great if Qianqian could be as cute as Yueyao when she grew up. Yueyao was quite likable. She was obviously raised like a little princess, but she didn't put on the airs of a princess. Don't worry, Xiaoyichen will be back soon. Just as they were talking, Yun Shirshir and Muyaja's voices came from outside the door. Sensing that her daddy and mommy were back, Yueyao kicked her legs and said that she wanted to come down. Just as Chuho put her down, Muyaja pushed the door open. Yueyao hurriedly walked over with the flowers in her hands. Suddenly, she bumped into the operating table that had just been pushed open. With a plop, she fell on her butt on the ground. Yun Shirshir was shocked when she saw this. Just as she was about to walk over and carry her, she saw Yueyao nimbly get up from the ground. She patted the dust off her butt and walked toward Xiaoyichen. Brother. Xiaoyichen was lying on the bed obediently. When he heard Yueyao's soft voice, he struggled to sit up. He had just been vaccinated and was still recovering. He was weak in all aspects, so when he sat up, he was a little out of breath. Just as he sat up, he saw Yueyao walking toward him with the flowers in her hands. Brother, welcome back. Xiaoyichen was stunned. Chapter 45-65. Yueyao finally peeked her head out from behind the bouquet. She was panting, but she insisted on handing the bouquet to Xiaoyichen. Brother, welcome back. Moi. Xiaoyichen was extremely touched. He knew that Daddy and Mommy would come personally to welcome him. Yu would also come personally to welcome him. However, he did not expect Yueyao to look forward to his return so much. In the past, Yueyao had despised him as her brother the most. He did not know why, but Yueyao was not close to him. Usually when everyone stood in a row in front of her, the first thing she would do was let Yu hug her. She would also let Gongjie hug her. Then it would be Yun Shishir and Muyaja. After that it would be his turn. However, he only realized now that he was so precious in Yueyao's heart. Xiaoyichen stretched out his arms and hugged the bouquet in satisfaction. Yueyao blinked and smiled. Her face was round and her eyes were like the moon. She seemed to have grown taller and thinner. He wondered if she had suffered a lot while he was not around. Knowing what Xiaoyichen was worried about, Yun Shishir quickly explained. Yueyao and Yu are in the 5th batch of vaccinations. The doctor said that they have already recovered, but to be safe, they can only leave after they have been vaccinated. Xiaoyichen nodded and said, Indeed. By the 5th batch of vaccinations their condition should have stabilized. The doctor said that if Yueyao was older, she could have been vaccinated earlier. At her age, she could only be in the 5th batch. It is relatively safer for her. Okay. Xiaoyichen lifted the blanket and was about to get out of bed. Yun Shishir immediately stopped him. Xiaoyichen, the doctor said that you can't get out of bed yet. It's okay, Mommy. Xiaoyichen smiled at her. Yun Shishir's heart softened and she silently retreated to the side. Xiaoyichen flipped over and got off the bed. The moment his feet touched the ground, he took a deep breath and held onto the bed to stabilize himself. He hadn't gotten out of bed for a long time. After lying on the bed for so long, he felt that his limbs were about to degenerate. Not only that, he had not exercised for a long time, and his various bodily functions had deteriorated. Every time he moved, his entire body would ache. Xiaoyichen ignored his own body and opened his arms to Yueyao with a smile. Good girl, Yueyao. Let me give you a hug. When Yueyao saw him get out of bed, she immediately went up to him and called out sweetly, Brother. He was so small, so how could he know anything? When he saw Xiaoyichen calling for him, he immediately pounced over without hesitation. However, she pounced on him so enthusiastically that Xiaoyichen, who was already weak, suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground. Yueyao was frightened and immediately used all her strength to support him. She held onto his arm and hugged his waist. She looked as though she was about to cry and looked at Yun Shishir. Mommy, what's going on? Brother seems to be. Xiaoyichen immediately tried to calm her down. It's okay. My legs are just a little weak. Yun Shishir looked at Muyaja worriedly. Muyaja walked over and helped him up. Is it because you haven't gotten out of bed for a long time? Is that why it's a little difficult to stand? Xiaoyichen nodded reluctantly. With Muyaja's help, he finally stood up. Yueyao supported him from the side and placed his hand on her shoulder. Brother, support me. I won't let you fall. Chapter 45-66. Yueyao hugged his shoulders. Even though it was a little strenuous, she still used all her strength to support his body. Yun Shishir walked over and couldn't help but scratch Yueyao's nose with heartache. Brother, are you heavy? Yueyao shook her head and said, No. Jingyang watched from the side. Ever since Xiaoyichen returned to the ward, he had been hesitant. After hesitating for a long time, he clenched his fists and finally mustered up his courage. He carefully walked forward and asked with a smile, Brother Yichen, do you want me to help? Xiaoyichen glanced at him from the corner of his eye and his face turned cold. Go away. Jingyang smiled. Okay. He tactfully walked to the side and sat on the bed aggrievedly. Yun Shishir and Chu Ho looked at this scene in a daze. For some reason they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was obvious that Jingyang wanted to curry favor with Xiaoyichen. After all, he was Yueyao's brother. Especially since Xiaoyichen had finally returned from death's door and successfully received the vaccine. He naturally wanted to welcome him. In the end, Xiaoyichen especially disliked Jingyang. He and Yueyao were so close that Xiaoyichen was most upset about it. Therefore, he was unwilling to pay attention to Jingyang. As a senior siscon, he still hadn't forgotten that Yue Yao had neglected him, and Yu for Jingyang. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Xiaoichen's guarded look. Chu Ho whispered, "Why do I feel that it will be difficult for Yue Yao to get married in the future?" Yun Shishir glanced at her and didn't react for a while. "Look, Yue Yao has 2 brothers who dote on her so much and a father who dotes on her. Whoever wants to marry Yue Yao in the future will have to conquer these 3 men. It's enough for him to suffer." After Chu Ho mentioned it, Yun Shishir also realized it. She sighed helplessly. "In our family, Yue Yao is the most precious. I'm also worried that he won't be able to get married in the future. Yaja is still fine. When Yue Yao was born, he was like a slave to his daughter. Now that I've brainwashed him, he's much better. However, those 2 guys, Yu and Xiaoichen, won't let Yue Yao suffer in the future. Yes. I really don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing." Yun Shishir shook her head. "It can't be anything good. When he grows Yue Yao, Yuaoichen, he will definitely have a family's family. If he does, Xiaoichen and Yuaoichen will definitely not get along with their brother-in-law. On top of that, Yaja is such a difficult father-in-law." For some reason, after hearing Yun Shishir's words, Chu Ho suddenly sympathized with Yue Yao's future husband. He's still young. When he grows up, perhaps it will be better. Yun Shishir shook her head. "No, the older he grows, the deeper the bond between the 3 children will be. Actually, everyone has always felt that Yuaoichen and Yu is too dependent on Xiaoichen and Yu. But in reality, Xiaoichen and Yu are too dependent on Yue Yao. Yuaoichen has a special meaning to them." "A special meaning?" Chu Ho didn't understand. "What special meaning?" Chapter 45-67. "I understand now." Chu Ho continued. "Actually, Xiao Bao feels the same way about Qian. However, he likes his younger sister very much, but he doesn't like his younger brother at all." Yun Shishir was surprised. "Why?" "Maybe it's because the same sex attracts and the opposite sex repels." That was a perfect answer. Yun Shishir couldn't stop laughing. The atmosphere in the ward was joyous and harmonious. It had been a few days and the ward had been gloomy. Now that Xiaoichen was back, the cheerful atmosphere finally returned. When Xiaoichen returned to the ward, he was still on the same bed. Although he couldn't leave the hospital for the time being, at least everything was stable after he was vaccinated. Although the public was still in a state of panic about the spread of the flu, they were still optimistic about the vaccine that was released this time. The atmosphere in the hospital was no longer lifeless. All the patients had new expectations for their lives. Soon, Xiao Bao came back with the good news that he could leave the quarantine zone. On the day that Xiao Bao left the quarantine zone, he was in good condition. Although he was in the first batch to receive the vaccine, he came out 2 days later than Xiaoichen. The doctor confirmed it again and again, and Chu Ho also asked about it. Overall, Xiao Bao's condition was good and stable, but it was slightly worse than expected. As long as he was given more nutrition, there would be no problem. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, Xiaoichen had almost recovered. Ever since he left the quarantine zone and returned to the ward, Yun Shishir was full of energy. Every day, she would eat fish soup and bones to nourish Xiaoichen's body. She couldn't wait to quickly recover in 3 to 5 days. Xiaoichen regained a lot of energy after eating so much fish and meat, as well as fruits and vegetables. Therefore, not long after, he could get out of bed and jump around. Xiaoichen's physical strength had decreased a lot after he was born with the disease, so he started to exercise after he recovered. He had to do 100 sets of push-ups every day. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, he was even sicker than Xiaoichen. He lay on the bed, unable to move at all. If it weren't for Xiaoichen, Chu Ho would have been worried sick. However, when he thought about how Xiaoichen had been like this when he came out and how he was still as lively as ever under Yun Shishir's care, Chu Ho wasn't worried at all. The welcoming ceremony was naturally very grand. When Xiao Bao was pushed into the ward, there were fireworks and a small corolla made by Yue Yao. However, Xiao Bao couldn't do anything other than lie on the bed. Chu Ho walked over to Xiao Bao with heartache and picked him up. Xiao Bao said weakly, "Mom, can you fulfill a wish of mine?" "What wish?" Xiao Bao pouted and tears almost fell from his eyes. "I want to eat ice cream." Everyone was silent. There was a long dead silence. Xiaoqian was the first to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Ice cream. Xiao Bao's first goal after coming out of the quarantine zone was to eat ice cream. Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Bao cried out pitifully. In the quarantine zone, no one let me eat ice cream. I haven't eaten ice cream in a long time. Chapter 45-68. Chuho did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not bear to see him like this. However, given Xiao Bao's current condition, he could not eat ice cream. Hence, she had no choice but to coax him. Okay. You can eat ice cream after you've completely recovered, okay? Xiao Bao did not give up. I want to eat it. I've been holding it in for a long time. I feel like I'd rather die without ice cream. When you heard this, she mocked. Impressive, Xiao Bao. You actually know how to use idioms. Looks like my training of you wasn't in vain. Humph. Xiao Bao ignored you. Xiaoqian said. Let him eat it. I think he can't wait to go back to the quarantine zone. Xiao Bao was instantly terrified. What does eating ice cream have to do with going back to the quarantine zone? The doctor didn't let you eat ice cream because if you eat it, it's cold and sweet. If your cough recurs and you develop pneumonia, you'll have to go back. Ha ha ha. Xiaoqian said. Eat it. Do you want me to buy it for you? Yun Shirshir reminded him weakly. Xiaoqian, you can't leave the ward yet. Then, Mommy will buy it for him. Xiao Bao suddenly snorted in a fit of pique. Forget it. I'm not eating it. Everyone smiled knowingly. Xiao Bao was probably the most cowardly and afraid of death among this group of children. There was no use in making threats and promises. If they told him directly that eating ice cream would worsen his condition, it would mean that he would have to be on countless drips and injections, and that would be enough to scare him. Xiao Bao raised his hand to show Chuho the dense needle marks and the residual needles on his hand. He sought comfort. Mommy, look at my hand. After being on the drip for a long time, both his arms were slightly swollen. Due to the long period of infusion, the needle in his left hand was almost gone, so he switched to his right hand. If his right hand wasn't enough, he switched to his forehead and instep. In short, Xiao Bao felt that when he drank water, water would seep out from these densely packed needle holes. Xiaoqian disagreed. Tsk. How delicate. I get more injections every day than you do. What did I say? Xiao Bao glanced at Xiaoqian with a gloomy expression. Who wants to be compared to you? You're not human. What kind of normal child would play with a gun? What kind of normal child would practice handstands in the ward when he was so ill? Mom, I'm telling you, Xiaoqian is a pervert. For a period of time, he did handstands in the ward every day. At that time, Xiao Bao was already paralyzed on the bed, and it was difficult for him to get up. Suffering from the flu and lying down for a long time, she was basically lifeless. Xiaoqian explained. At that time I felt weak all over, so I thought that I should exercise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. Yun Shirshir was speechless. The doctor and nurse had already told her about this. Xiaoqian thought that his muscle weakness was caused by being bedridden for a long time. Therefore, he forced himself to do handstands and push-ups. Even when his condition worsened, he could still do a few sets a day. What was even more perverse was that his appetite was not bad. It was so good that it made one's hair stand on end. It was because he ate too much that he vomited after eating, and his stomach almost burned out. Actually, the muscle weakness was caused by the long period of infusion. In addition, he didn't have enough nutrition, so he couldn't eat and drink too much. He could only eat in moderation. Chapter 45-69. Every time the nurse saw him, the latter would be stunned. Yun Shirshir even suspected that his good health had been damaged because of him. Today is a day worth celebrating. Chuho had always been serious. Now that Xiao Bao was finally released from prison, she smiled happily. Today is the day that the two little guys are reborn. No matter what, it would be great if we could have a good drink tonight. Yun Shirshir's eyes lit up when she heard that. That's a really good suggestion. Muyaja said. It would be even better if there was red wine. Chuho shook her head. It's such a hot day. Why don't we drink beer? It'll relieve the heat and we won't get drunk easily. Yun Shirshir seemed to have figured something out. In that case, Chuhi's alcohol tolerance doesn't seem to be very good. Chuho retorted. Better than you. Yun Shirshir suddenly turned her head and said to Muyaja, let's have a good drink tonight? Okay. It's rare to be so happy. After such a long period of worrying, Yun Shirshir felt uneasy day and night and found it hard to close her eyes. Now she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her desire to drink was so strong. Muyaja heard that and patted her head helplessly. I know. Let's have a drink. I'll make an exception for you tonight. Okay. Chuho suddenly said, I know a really good place. At night, it's quiet and the wind is comfortable. Also, no one will disturb you. Yun Shirshir reminded him, you can't leave the hospital. It's in the hospital. Where? You'll know tonight. Chuho said mysteriously. At night, Yun Shirshir went to the supermarket to buy a lot of cooked vegetables. They were the kind that had been processed and could be eaten directly. Although they weren't exquisite and were relatively cheap, most office workers who didn't have time to cook would go to the supermarket to buy cooked vegetables. The taste was definitely not top-notch, but it was still not bad. After buying cooked vegetables, a case of beer, peanuts, and kimchi, the group of people entered the hospital under the cover of the big meal. Chuho led a group of people to the balcony of the hospital. It turned out that the perfect place she was talking about was the hospital's balcony. It was big and spacious. During the day, many doctors and nurses would wash their work clothes and dry them here. At night, all the clothes would be taken away, leaving only the bare clothes rack. After moving the clothes rack away, Yun Shirshir spread out the soft cushions she bought on the balcony. It was a very large area and the group of people sat on it. Xiaoyi-chen and Yu were the first to lie down. As the night breeze blew, they felt extremely comfortable. So comfortable. When Chuho heard this, he said proudly, comfortable, right? What do you think about this place? Muyaja praised from the bottom of his heart. I'll give you a first-class merit. Everyone sat down on the cushions. Yun Shirshir couldn't wait to put the fragrant cooked vegetables on the small table one by one. Muyaja opened the can of beer. It was the first time he and Gu Jinglian had eaten like this. Although many of the cooked dishes looked strange, the aroma and the fact that they were really hungry stimulated everyone's appetite. These are pig's ears. Try it. Yun Shirshir urged Muyaja. Muyaja picked up one with his chopsticks and put it in his mouth. It was very chewy. It was fragrant and crispy. It was surprisingly delicious. Is it good? Chapter 45-70. Muyaja was a little surprised. He did not expect these cooked dishes, which cost more than 10 yuan per serving, to be so delicious. Perhaps it was because he was in a good mood as he sat on the balcony with the night breeze blowing. After all, Xiaoyi-chen had come back from the gates of hell, so he had put all his worries aside. He felt that the burden on his shoulders had suddenly been lifted. Therefore, he felt that whatever he ate tasted better than sitting in a 5-star hotel or a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Gu Jinglian was also in a good mood. Although he usually despised Xiaobao to death, Gu Jinglian often had nightmares when Xiaobao was sick. He often comforted himself that Xiaobao was lucky and would not be defeated by a mere influenza. However, Xiaoyi-chen's critical illness had also frightened him. Perhaps one would only know how to cherish something when faced with loss. Ever since Xiaobao returned to the ward, Gu Jinglian's attitude towards him had become especially gentle. It was to the extent that Xiaobao was a little uncomfortable. Sure enough, he was used to being abused. Being treated so gently all of a sudden made him uncomfortable all over. He missed the old Gu Jinglian who used to be so rough with him. Chuho thought to himself, this father and son pair, one is a sadist and the other is a masochist. Come. Yun Shirshir held a bottle of beer and raised it high. Let's celebrate the glorious return of Xiaoyi-chen and Xiaobao. When everyone heard this, they laughed and raised the bottles of beer in their hands. Cheers! Cheers! Ding! 5 or 6 bottles of beer clinked together. Everyone was in a good mood and finished the beer in one gulp. Xiaoyi-chen watched as Yun Shirshir gulped down the entire bottle of beer. He also felt a little hungry. He tugged at her sleeve and said, Mommy. I want to drink beer too. Children are not allowed to drink. Chuho had just taken a sip when he suddenly realized what was going on. He exclaimed, What kind of beer is this? Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows and said, I bought it casually. The beer should be the same. This beer has a strong aftertaste. He took a closer look at the logo and was left speechless. Wusu beer. On the label, the words Wusu were especially eye-catching. Yun Shirshir was a little startled. What's wrong? Wusu beer. I think this beer is quite expensive, so it should be delicious. Cough. This is Wusu. Wusu. Yu was shocked. Killer Wusu? Wusu, it could not. How could a supermarket sold Wusu? He held her forehead and explained. Turn the bottle upside down. Wusu. In other words, an in Wusu. Wusu of Wusu, then in what's wrong? Is there something wrong? Some people jokingly say that the English words on the label are the abbreviation for kill you all. Pht. Muyaja understood. This means that the aftertaste of this beer is very strong. For people who are not used to drinking it, the aftertaste is quite strong. Chuho thought to herself. No wonder the taste was so familiar. She had drunk a bottle when she was at work, and the aftertaste was unusually strong. She did not feel anything at first, but when she was full and stood up, she felt a lack of oxygen in her brain. Then, she felt as if she was walking on air. This beer actually doesn't taste that good. It's so expensive, Gu Jinglian complained. Chapter 4571. Weird taste. Gu Jinglian mocked. Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why? You're not used to it, so you won't allow others to say that it's good? Gu Jinglian said. It tastes so bad. Yun Shirshir put her hands on her hips and said, I was the one who bought the beer. He dares to say that it doesn't taste good. Ha ha ha. Yu and Xiaoichen looked at each other and laughed knowingly. Beside them, Yueyao took advantage of Yun Shirshir's carelessness and secretly took a sip of the beer. She frowned when she tasted the beer. Wow. It tastes terrible. Xiaoichen quickly snatched the beer back from Yueyao and said angrily, You've learned how to drink secretly. You little rascal. I thought it would taste good, but it turns out to be so terrible. Yueyao frowned in disdain. Everyone was amused by her and burst into laughter again. Yun Shirshir hugged the beer bottle and looked up at the night sky. The moon was full. The happiest thing in life was a family reunion. She gently rested her head on Muyaja's shoulder and sighed comfortably. East Africa. At the hospital. Suddenly, there was a burst of thunder outside the window. Hua Jin suddenly woke up and sat up from the bed in shock. What's going on? Calm down. Gong Jia was sitting by the window and looking at the smoke outside. They're fighting again. They're fighting again. Yeah. Hasn't the war already stopped? Gong Jia smiled mysteriously. The war stopped because the military had run out of ammunition and food. With the intervention of the international organizations, there's no more ammunition. Since there's no war preparation, why are they fighting now? Because, Gong Jia said meaningfully, Hurricane gave them enough ammunition. Hua Jin was stunned. Gong Jia had stayed in the hospital for so long without making a move. He had asked everyone to wait carefully because he was waiting for this? He took advantage of this period of time and ordered Hurricane to provide all the ammunition to the war maniacs at the relay station in East Africa. Then he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to leave this barren land? Then what should we do now? It's about time. Gong Jia turned around. Hua Jin saw that he had been armed from head to toe while he was sleeping. Clean and tidy combat uniform, long combat boots, bulletproof armor, and a full set of equipment behind his waist. Gong Jia looked especially dashing in his uniform. More importantly, his handsomeness was not just superficial. The reason why the FBI had assigned so many people to be on standby was because they knew that Gong Jia was a formidable target, so they had to be on their guard. This is your bulletproof vest and combat uniform. Also, you just need to carry these two guns with you when you follow me. One was a rifle and the other was a pistol. Hua Jin was not proficient in firearms. These two guns were only for self-defense. Hua Jin braced himself and equipped himself with both guns. He asked with some concern, Will I be a burden to you? Gong Jia glanced at him coldly. Of course you will. Gong Jia said unhappily. I told you to stay in Hurricane but you didn't. So you came all the way to East Africa just to be a burden to me? Of course not. Hua Jin held the rifle and frowned. I'm worried. Worried about me? Yeah. The artillery shell blasted a huge crater 300 meters away from the hospital. A row of houses were on fire. Originally, there was a shelter for refugees near the hospital. Now, all the refugees had gathered at the hospital, and it had become a wasteland. In the hospital, someone screamed hysterically, "Air raid! It's an air raid!" Chapter 4573. The air raid alarm went off instantly. Outside the corridor, doctors and nurses were rushing around. "Quick! Everyone gather and take refuge in the hospital's air raid shelter. There's an air raid. Everyone pay attention." This hospital usually accepted the wounded from the war. Originally, in the war-torn zone, there was a shortage of resources and medical equipment. They could only treat some external injuries. Refugees who were infected with the plague were not accepted by the hospital. Most of the patients were either missing an arm or a leg. With the help of the nurses, they struggled to run to the underground air raid shelter. Gong Jie grabbed Hua Jin's hand and broke through the door. As soon as he broke through the door, Hua Jin saw the long corridor full of injured people. The corridor was packed with people. "There are so many people. Follow me." Gong Jie pulled Hua Jin and stuck close to the wall. They avoided the panicking injured people and finally arrived at the staircase. Unlike those who were using crutches or supporting the injured with broken arms, they had all 4 limbs and were able to move freely. They went down to the first floor in no time. Gong Jie saw the FBI agents guarding the entrance at a glance. All of them had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were particularly eye-catching in the crowd of dark-skinned people. Gong Jie and Hua Jin, on the other hand, were conspicuous. The FBI agents also noticed them immediately. Reporting target spotted. Attack. Execute the arrest plan. A few blonde men broke through the crowd and walked toward Gong Jie and Hua Jin with difficulty. Gong Jie turned around and glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window in the corridor. He pushed Hua Jin away a little. Then, with a powerful roundhouse kick, he shattered the floor-to-ceiling window. Crash! The glass shattered all over the floor. Gong Jie grabbed Hua Jin's hand and rushed out with him. Behind them, they heard American English with a New York accent. "Don't hurt the refugees. Attention! Unless absolutely necessary, don't shoot. Don't hurt the target, don't hurt the innocent." When the FBI carried out their plan, they first had to comply with international security laws. No matter how special the situation was, they could not harm refugees or citizens of other countries. This was also part of Gong Jie's plan. Create chaos. Taking advantage of the chaos, they could shake off the FBI's pursuit. In fact, things were going according to his plan. Gong Jie held Hua Jin's hand and rushed through the crowd to find his men guarding outside the door. 2 of the mercenaries had already driven a car over. When they saw Gong Jie and Hua Jin running over, the car immediately started. Gong Jie helped Hua Jin into the car first. The engine had already started and the car was already more than 10 meters away. He ran a few steps and jumped into the car. With one hand on the car door and the other holding the gun, he turned around and saw the 2 agents chasing after him at lightning speed. He took out his gun, aimed at one of the men's knees and shot twice. When the other agent saw that Gong Jie was about to leave, he couldn't hold back anymore. He raised his wrist and aimed his gun at Gong Jie's knees. Hua Jin saw it, but before he could shout, Gong Jie had already made the first move. Bang! He shot that man's wrist. Ouch! The car quickly shook them off. Gong Jie got into the car and slammed the door shut. He smoothed his messy hair and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Hua Jin asked, "Are we safe now?" "Not yet. Before we board the ship, we are still in danger." Gong Jie turned his head and looked at Hua Jin. "Are you scared?" Chapter 4574. There was a kind of superstition about him. He always felt that Gong Jie, this man was omnipotent. As long as he was here, even if the sky fell down and the world ended, he would protect him and ensure his safety. The car drove towards the port. Hua Jin suddenly asked suspiciously, "Will there be FBI agents at the port?" "I don't know." Gong Jie looked at the back of the car through the window and did not see anyone chasing after them. Now that there's a riot, those American guys should be panicking. After Gong Jie said that, Hua Jin still did not let down his guard. Until the car reached the port, everything was unbelievably smooth. Alice was already waiting at the port. When she saw Gong Jia and Hua Jin, she immediately walked over. Here again. Hua Jin held his forehead with a headache. The last time I was here, I think I was kidnapped to East Africa. Not long after, I'm revisiting the old place. Don't tell me you can't bear to leave East Africa and refuse to leave. No. Hua Jin immediately showed a frightened expression. I can't wait to put on my wings and leave this place. All right, cut the crap. Hurry up and get on the boat. Alice kicked Hua Jin's back and chased him onto the boat. Feeling aggrieved, Hua Jin turned around and glared at her resentfully. Violent woman. If you continue to talk nonsense, I won't use this to chase you onto the boat. As Alice said that, she pulled out a gun from her waist belt and aimed it at him. Hua Jin was so frightened that he quickly shrunk his shoulders and boarded the boat. Gong Jia stepped onto the boat ladder and turned around to look at Alice. He wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he did not say anything. Alice looked at him and suddenly smiled. Why are you looking at me? Nothing. Gong Jia casually threw the gun at her. Alice caught it and shook her head helplessly. She took the opportunity to clip the gun behind her waist. With just a glance, they understood each other's intentions. Alice exhaled, turned around, and boarded the ship. The armed cargo ship gradually left the port. Hua Jin leaned against the bow of the ship and looked at the distant mountain peak. Peace is great. It's great to live in a peaceful country. Life was too fragile. Therefore, he had to cherish the present and grasp the present. Gong Jia walked to his side and leaned against the bow with him. He gently bumped his shoulder and asked, What are you thinking about? I'm thinking that it's precisely because life is so fragile that we should cherish it even more. Gong Jia smiled deeply. You don't have to cherish life. You just have to cherish me. What do you mean by cherishing? Seize every minute and second of being together. Gong Jia rarely said such romantic words. Hua Jin was flattered. He stared at him. Suddenly he leaned over, put his arms around the back of his neck, and kissed him deeply. He rarely took the initiative to kiss him. Gong Jia smiled and hugged his shoulders. While enjoying the kiss, he also deepened the kiss. This was a kiss after surviving a disaster. It was also a kiss that Hua Jin had been late for a long time. Under the setting sun, Gong Jia and Hua Jin kissed tightly. The warm rays of the sunset poured down on their bodies, softly plating their figures with a layer of gold. They were so beautiful that they looked like sculptures. Alice stood at the head of the lower deck. Separated by the railing, the sea breeze blew on her face. It had been a long time since she felt cool. Chapter 45-75. In a dilapidated house in the capital. It had just rained heavily, and even the air felt damp. In addition, there was also the smell of green grass in the air. Byran did not like this smell very much. She sat in front of the table by the window and looked out of the window in a daze. She did not like the wet grass smell in the air, but she had to open the window to get some fresh air after the heavy rain. The table in front of her was very old. When she was studying, this table was piled full of review questions and homework. After graduation, it was cleaned up a little and became a simple dressing table. There were some cheap skincare products on it, the most basic moisturizing products. A facial mask was only 5 yuan, but it was still a little extravagant for her, who had just graduated and only had a salary of 4,000 to 5,000 yuan. She did not dare to be too extravagant. She applied it once every 4 days on her face, neck, and knees. In short, she made the best use of everything. Although she had just graduated and her salary was not high, Byran had been very vain since she was young. Sitting in front of the mirror, Byran looked at her face in the mirror and was slightly lost in thought. The 24-year-old Byran had already grown into a slender and elegant woman. She looked like a beauty. Byran, are you ready? Someone shouted outside the door. Byran gently patted her face that was stiff because of nervousness and hurriedly stood up. Yes, I'm ready. She walked into the narrow living room and saw a middle-aged woman waiting for her. Seeing that she was wearing ordinary clothes, she could not help but feel a little disgusted. How can you dress like this for such a big event like a blind date? Don't you think it's embarrassing? Auntie, I don't have any nice dresses. This is the most decent one. Byran paused and asked tentatively, so it's another blind date? How many blind dates have you had this week? Since you know, don't let me down. You're not young anymore. It's better to get married early. Byran said weakly. Auntie, I'm only 24 years old. Marriage is not urgent, right? You're not in a hurry, but I'm not in a hurry. How long do you want me to take care of you? Byran's breathing suddenly became rapid. There were several times when she wanted to leave this house, but she had just started working and did not have much savings. It was not easy to save a few thousand yuan, but it was not even enough to pay the rent. The memories of his childhood were already very distant. She vaguely remembered that when she was in kindergarten, her parents had left her in a car accident, along with the child she was pregnant with. Overnight, there was only one person left in the warm home. However, the pain of losing his parents was not as deep as it had been with the passage of time. After that incident, she lived with her grandparents and returned to her hometown to study. However, when she was in junior high school, her grandfather passed away from lung cancer. On the 7th day of her grandfather's death, her grandmother died of a myocardial infarction due to the heavy blow. She died suddenly in front of her grandfather's memorial tablet. From then on, she was kicked around like a ball in front of her uncles and aunts. In the end, it was her youngest aunt who was merciful and took her to her side, providing for her food, clothing, and education. His aunt's surname was Jiang. In order to settle down, Baikun temporarily followed his uncle's surname, Jiang Baikun. Chapter 4576. However, after graduation, her aunt kept urging her to go on blind dates. There was a premise to this. Her aunt had a son, but he was not proficient in his studies and did not even pass high school. In the end, after graduating from technical school, he did not do a proper job and always stayed at home playing games on his computer. Little aunt had placed all her hopes on her. However, Byran had just graduated from university. As a fashion designer, how much could she achieve as a fledgling? Therefore, this conservative woman felt that it was useless for a woman to study until university. It was better for her to get married as soon as possible. However, blind dates were definitely not that simple. This little aunt had conditions for the blind date. The first requirement for the person she found for Byran was that he had a successful career. Even if he did not have a successful career, he had to be rich. As a betrothal gift, a house in the capital had to be transferred to her son's name. The first blind date was with a demolition family. A house in the capital had been demolished, and he was worth hundreds of millions. However, he was divorced and had a child. The second blind date was with a small boss, but he was old. She had gone on blind dates several times, and he was not younger than 35 years old. Byran was angry. What did they take her for? Every time she protested, her aunt would take it for granted. She had raised her for so long, studied in the capital, and spent money on food and clothes. Now that she was of age, shouldn't she repay her? Her uncle's family was in the capital, and they were old citizens. Other than the old and broken house left behind by their grandparents, their son was getting married, and they did not have a wedding house. Which girl would be willing to marry a man who did not do a proper job and had no education or ability? And a family of 4 squeezed into a 50-square-meter house? Byran was young and beautiful, so she was naturally the target of her aunt's expectations. Byran naturally brushed off the first few blind dates. She thought that she could finally stop. Not long after, she found another person for her. Today, she did not know how to brush it off. Byran took the address and walked out of the neighborhood. Suddenly, she felt very sad. She just wanted to do her job properly. Yi Yuqin watched Byran leave the neighborhood with a gloomy face. What sin have I committed to bring back such a money-losing thing? If she drives away the blind date today, I will definitely chase her out with a broom. A middle-aged man's lazy voice came from behind. What kind of person did you find for her today? Yi Yuqin turned around. She was quite satisfied at the mention of her blind date. I heard that he's the boss of a renovation company. He's quite rich and agreed to my conditions. He has seen her photo. As long as she agrees, any condition is negotiable. Who knows, she might have angered them away again. She's really capable in this aspect. She dares. Yi Yuqin was infuriated. I was having a good conversation. She dares to push me away again. They took the bus to the subway and finally arrived at the cafe in the city center after passing through the crowd. After the rain, the sun soon came out, and it became a little stuffy. This cafe was one of the more famous ones in the capital. Sitting in the cafe, Byran added the man's WeChat and sent a message. I'm here. Wait for me, I'll be there soon. Chapter 4577. Temperament was really a magical thing. Just by looking at this handsome back, she could vaguely imagine that it should be a young and handsome man. She retracted her gaze and looked out of the window, only to see a middle-aged balding man hurriedly passing by the window. She looked at him until she saw him walk into the coffee shop. Suddenly, she had a bad premonition. Byran stared blankly as the man walked in front of her and said in a very apologetic tone, Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late. Did you wait long? No, I just arrived too. Byran's face stiffened as she clenched her fists. She actually didn't have any expectations, but she didn't expect that her aunt would find a man of this age for her. The man politely raised his hand, tucked his sparse hair behind his ear, and sat down. Do you want something to drink? I'm fine. Milk coffee, is that okay? Yes. The man called the waiter over and ordered 2 cups of coffee and some desserts. Then, he turned his head and looked at the girl opposite him. It could be seen that the Byran opposite him was young, immature, and had a hint of immaturity. Her appearance was beautiful and exquisite. Most importantly, her temperament was excellent, with a hint of scholarly aura. It was said that she was a graduate of a famous university. In that case, her brain was also very bright. For a businessman like him, when looking for a partner, he also looked at the other party's education. The man smiled and said, Let me introduce myself first. My name is Mo Kong. I'm 39 years old this year. I've been married twice before, but I don't have any children. What about you? Byran lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. Byran, 24 years old. I just graduated. Do you have a job? Yes. Let me tell you about my general situation. The man began to introduce himself. From the renovation company he ran, the size of its scale, the annual benefits, how many apartments he had in the capital, how much the property fee was per square meter, how much the car he drove, and even the annual insurance premiums of the car would be taken out to brag. His mouth, other than a mouthful of teeth that were yellowed by smoke, was filled with a strong sense of superiority. The more Byran listened, the more disgusted she became. The man was boasting while paying attention to Byran's expression. However, he didn't see any yearning or interest on her face. Instead, he saw a kind of boredom. What happened? The man asked with concern. I've said so much, but you haven't told me about yourself. Byran sighed. Mr. Mo, to tell you the truth, this blind date with you was forced by my aunt. Yes, I know. The man said with a knowing tone. Byran continued. Actually, I haven't decided to get married yet. The man's face stiffened. You don't plan to get married? Are you rejecting me? Or did he want to use this opportunity to raise more conditions? Byran took a deep breath and said, You're very good. I can't match you. So, Mr. Mo, why don't you look for someone else for the blind date? She wanted to end this blind date in a perfunctory manner. After she finished speaking, she was about to pick up her bag. Just as she was about to get up, the man's face suddenly darkened. You and your aunt are singing the same tune. Are you playing with me? No. Chapter 4578. Zhangbai, I think you still haven't figured it out, have you? Your aunt has told me everything about you. Do you really not know what she's thinking right now? Or are you pretending not to know? She's in a hurry to marry you off, do you know that? Byran was stunned and fell onto the sofa. I was wrong. She's not marrying you off. She just wants to sell you to me. I'll buy it, okay? What did you say? The man knocked on the table. I heard that your cousin has never worked since he graduated from a technical school. Does your aunt have any other houses? Who doesn't want to have a house and a car when they get married now? But why don't you look at the current property prices? They're easily tens of thousands of yuan per square meter. As for me, I'm sincere. If you're willing to marry me, then as a betrothal gift, I'll give your aunt a house. This is also your aunt's request. As for you, follow me. As long as you give birth to a fat boy for me in the future, you can enjoy life with me. Byran's face turned ashen. She thought that Yi Yuqin would despise her, but she didn't think that she was being sold. Was this a blind date? Was this human trafficking? A house in exchange for a wife? How could she make such an outrageous request? If it weren't for the fact that you're young, beautiful, highly educated, and have never had a boyfriend in school, with your conditions, a house of more than 10 million yuan. That's too flattering of you. The man paused for a moment, then said, I heard that you've been on a blind date a few times, and they've all been angered back by you. Your aunt has some complaints about this. It's not that I want to criticize you, but you're too willful. Your parents died early, and your aunt worked hard to raise you. Don't you know how to be grateful? Besides, am I not good enough? We definitely won't treat you shabbily for your food and clothing. Byran was so angry that her entire body froze. Byran, don't think too highly of yourself. You know very well what your background is. I'm with you, you're the one who made a fortune. Before he could finish, Byran said, Scram! What? Scram! Byran stood up and threw her bag at him. I told you to scram. Did you hear me? The man was infuriated by her attitude. He originally wanted to scold her, but when he looked around and saw that there were so many people watching, he suddenly felt embarrassed. He spat and left without looking back. Baikun slumped down powerlessly. She wanted to hold it in, but more and more criticism came from around her. Finally, she couldn't hold back the humiliation in her heart and sobbed. Woo 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 woo. The people around her kept looking at her. A blind date? What kind of parent is this? She actually found such a man for her daughter. How ungentlemanly. Haven't you heard? Her parents died a long time ago, and she was raised by her aunt. He's being disliked. How pitiful. Diagonally in front, the straight back slowly turned around. The man looked in the direction of Byran and saw her sitting on the sofa in a sorry state. His handsome eyebrows furrowed slightly. He didn't know why, but when he saw her red eyes, his heart was slightly moved. He suddenly stood up and walked towards her. Baihao stooped and gritted his teeth. He was crying silently when a handkerchief was handed to him. Chapter 45-79. Baiyu looked up blankly, only to meet the man's pitiful gaze. It's him? The man who sat diagonally in front of her just now. This was a man who was as gentle as jade. He had handsome facial features, a deep outline, and a pair of eyes that had a faint smile. However, there was a trace of feminine beauty between his brows, but because of this extraordinary smile, it was perfectly blended. She was a little surprised by the handkerchief he handed over, but she still politely thanked him and took it. So embarrassed. She was sitting in such a quiet cafe with so many people, yet she was so down and out. She must have become a laughing stock in everyone's eyes. Can I sit down? The man did not leave but asked indifferently. Baiyu did not refuse and nodded lightly. Sit down. The man sat down in front of her. At this moment, Baiyu's phone suddenly rang. Baiyu picked up the phone and saw that it was an unknown number. Just as she picked it up, the man's fierce voice came from the other side. Jiang Baiyu, you made me lose face today. In the future, I won't let you have an easy time. I think you shouldn't go back. Your aunt said that if the blind date didn't work out tonight, she'll definitely chase you out with a broom. With that, the man angrily hung up the phone. Baiyu put down the phone with a cold expression, but looked at the man opposite her with a slightly shocked expression. She pursed her lips, feeling even more embarrassed. Your name is Baiyu? The man suddenly asked. Baiyu was a little surprised and finally looked at her seriously. She was a little surprised by the man's surprised tone. We have met before? Oh, nothing. The man slightly curled his lips and smiled. The waiter came over and served the coffee. Baiyu asked, Are you waiting for someone? The man looked out of the window. Same as you. Same. Baiyu was in disbelief. Do you know why I came to the cafe? Blind date, right? The man's handsome face showed a look of understanding. But it seems like you were forced? Baiyu's tears gradually dried up, but she was still very depressed. When she thought about going back and facing her aunt's storm, she felt a heavy stone pressing down on her heart. The man ordered another cup of coffee. Seeing her disappointed expression, he asked, Coincidentally, I'm alone too. Do you mind? It's fine, I don't mind. Baihao couldn't think of a good place to go. He couldn't go home for the time being. She just wanted to sit quietly for a while. Where are your parents? The man suddenly asked. When I was very young, they died in a car accident, Baihao said quietly. It wasn't until later that I heard from my grandmother that my mother was pregnant at that time. In fact, not only did I lose my parents, I also lost a younger brother or sister. She didn't know why, but chatting with this man made her feel relaxed. Therefore, with this topic, it was as if she was pouring out her grievances to him. She poured out all the oppression and pain that she had endured since she was young. Chapter 45-80. The man listened silently, like a loyal listener. Byron said sadly, I know it wasn't easy for her to raise me since I was young, but did she never have any selfish thoughts about me? My cousin couldn't study well, so she placed all her hopes on me. I also promised her that no matter what happened in the future, I would take care of her until she died. But I just graduated not long ago, and my job is just the beginning. How can I have great achievements after graduating? My aunt probably finally lost her patience and is anxious to marry me off. That's fine, but she actually asked for such an outrageous condition. She was wondering why her blind date partner was getting older and had a worse attitude each time. If it wasn't for today, she really wouldn't know that she was being ruthlessly schemed against by her aunt. The man suddenly asked, What do you think about marriage? Byron gently rubbed the handle of the coffee. Actually, I've never had any illusions about marriage. My future husband doesn't need to be too rich, nor does he need to have a wealthy identity. Even if he rents a house, it's fine as long as he gives me a home and doesn't let me wander around. The man was puzzled. But didn't your aunt ask your future husband to buy her a house? I won't compromise on this matter. Yu tried to restrain himself. Since she raised me up, I won't argue with her about anything. But if she wants to use my marriage to exchange for this house, I'll definitely not do it. The man raised his eyebrows slightly, and his jade-like face suddenly raised a touch of probing. Then what do you think of me? Byron looked up in confusion. The man stared at her eyes seriously and said word by word, Let's get married. Are you willing? Byron widened her eyes slightly, and her breathing stopped slightly. Creak. The rusty iron door was pushed open, and Byron's weak voice could be heard. I'm back. Returning home from the crowded subway station during the evening rush hour, she was already exhausted. Yi Yuqin walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron. She rubbed her hands on the apron and looked expectant. How was the blind date this time? Hao didn't answer. Instead, he wore a lukewarm expression. Auntie, where did you keep the household register? Household register? Yi Yuqin did not hide her surprise when she heard that Byron wanted to take the household register. Did this mean that the blind date was a success? Otherwise, what was the point of using the household register? Asking for the household registration booklet meant that they were going to get the marriage certificate. She had never expected this development. Originally, she had been scared out of her wits. However, Byron had angered her blind date and made her run away. Otherwise, she would dawdle. Although she didn't reject the blind date, she didn't explicitly agree either. A long delay meant trouble. She was so surprised that she felt like she was in a dream. Great. This is great. Is this a success? Yi Yuqin's greedy expression appeared on her face. Hao nodded gently. He could see the ambition in her eyes more clearly. All right, just you wait. I'll get it for you. Yi Yuqin hurriedly rummaged through the drawers and took out the household register. She carefully handed it to Byron. Are you going to get your marriage certificate now? The Civil Affairs Bureau is closed now. Byron said. Let's go get the marriage certificate tomorrow. This is too sudden. Chapter 45-81. At this time, Yi Yuqin started to be hypocritical. My daughter is about to get married. As her aunt, I can't bear to part with her. But I can't keep you by my side all the time. A grown girl can't be kept at home. Since this matter was settled, she had to ask about the house some other day. Yi Yuqin asked indirectly. Since you've decided to get married, why don't you bring him home to meet you? Do you want to meet him? Of course. Then we'll have to wait until tomorrow. Byron said, It's too late today. He has something to do. That's true. This big boss of a renovation company must be very busy. Tomorrow, I'll prepare a table of good wine and dishes. Then you can call him home and have a meal together. You're getting married, so you have to meet his parents. We've treated you like your biological parents for so many years. In the future, we'll be the ones to send you off to get married. Yi Yuqin's enthusiasm made her even more disappointed. Okay, she answered hastily and went back to her room. The next day, Byran woke up very early. When she woke up, she received a text message from that man. Remember to wear a white shirt and put on light makeup. She did not have time to contact the man. Yesterday, the man had mentioned the marriage to her too suddenly. When the man introduced himself, she was not in the mood to listen carefully, so she did not even remember his name. If she asked again, she would feel embarrassed. The reason why she agreed to marry him on a whim was that Byran was getting more and more exhausted by the marriage that her aunt had arranged for her. She had a little interest in revenge and a little bit of anger. Moreover, she had a good impression of this man. Hence, the lightning marriage was completed in one go. As for why the man had chosen her as his marriage partner, the man frankly said that marriage in such a city was too burdensome for someone of his status. The house was easily worth more than 10 million, the car, the gift money. Actually, the marriage he wanted was very simple. A very small house, even if it was only 2 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. Every day when he came home from work, he could lean on the bed with his wife and watch TV. This was his most ordinary dream. He had also promised her that after marriage, they would live together according to her wishes. She just had to be mentally prepared. As for the matters between husband and wife, it was all up to her. Marriage was obviously such an important thing. Why did it seem so frivolous when it came to this man? What if they were not suitable for each other? What would happen if they divorced in the future? Bai Chong didn't dare to think too much. Perhaps it was because he was really stimulated that he didn't think too much about the future. Holding the household register and ID card, Byran put on a white shirt, put on some light makeup and went out. The man sent a text message saying that he was almost at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Byran was afraid that the morning rush hour would delay him and make him wait too long. So he took a taxi directly to the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. The man was already in the registration hall. He had asked for 2 forms in advance and was filling them out seriously. Bai Hao walked to him and stood behind him. At first glance, he saw the old man's vigorous handwriting. The name was a little messy, but it looked very nice, like a carefully designed signature. Chapter 4582. He was just like his name. This man gave people a feeling of gentleness, and so did his name. Have you been here for a long time? The man looked back at her and said, No, I just got here not long ago. I was afraid that you would wait for too long, so I quickly took a taxi here. There was a bit of traffic on the way. Bai Yin explained carefully and sat down opposite him. The man handed her a pen and paper and said to her, I've already filled in my name. You just have to fill in your name. Okay. Bai Kun held a pen and paper and filled his name in the female column. Then he copied some words that looked like a declaration and passed it to him. So this man's name was Gu Changze. It was easy to remember. She remembered it immediately. Gu Changze saw that she handed him the pen and paper, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why are you giving it to me? Ah! You should give it to the window. Oh! Bai Yin stood up in a panic and was about to walk to the window when the man called out to her again. Wait! What's wrong? Gu Changze stood up and walked to her side. He was 1.85 meters tall, and his aura was almost a notch above hers. She had been sitting down yesterday, so she didn't realize that he was so tall. Because they had said goodbye at the cafe, she didn't notice his height. He had been sitting down since he entered the registration hall, so she didn't have the chance to see him. She didn't expect him to be so tall. Also, from her angle, his side profile was unbelievably exquisite. She had never seen a man with such exquisite features in the real world. The man did not notice her scrutiny. Instead, he took the application form from her hands and handed it to the window. After exchanging a few words with the staff, he turned around and said to her, Did you bring your household register and ID card? Yes. Bai Yin gave him all the documents and asked, I also brought the cost of the production. It's fine. How can I let my wife pay for this? The man said as he took out his wallet. However, the word wife made Bai Yin lower her head shyly. She didn't know where to look. Suddenly, she realized that it seemed unnecessary to keep questioning her choice on the way here. This man seemed to be a good marriage partner. All along they had been dating before getting married. After dating for so long, once they got married, it was very easy for their marriage to go wrong and fall into crisis. Then, a marriage without any understanding must be even more dangerous, right? She didn't know anything about this man. Although she had never been in a relationship before, he gave her an unprecedented sense of security. Most importantly, if she got married, it would mean that she would have her own little family in the future. She didn't know if this feeling was reliable or not. All right. The man suddenly interrupted her thoughts and said to her, "Let's go take some photos." Bai Chong came back to his senses and nodded. He took back his ID card and household register and walked to a room with the man. The photographer stood behind the camera and directed the two of them to sit in front of the red background. The man deliberately wore a white shirt, which was similar to her style. The snow-white shirt made his skin clean and delicate, and his temperament was refined. Chapter 4583. Both of you should sit closer together. Smile, woman, you should smile too. Today is a big day, don't be so stiff. Be more natural. Yes, your smile is too stiff. The man is holding the woman's shoulder. Gu Changza raised his hand and gently put it on Bai Ran's shoulder. Bai Hao tried hard to ease his tense mood. Finally, he showed a natural smile. Okay, that's it. Hold it for 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Snap. The cameraman took a few photos and put down the camera. He walked over and congratulated Gu Changza and Bai Ran. Congratulations to the two newlyweds. After the photo shoot, Bai Ran and Gu Changza walked out of the room and sat on a long bench, waiting for the certificate to be completed. There was a long silence between the two of them. Gu Changza, on the other hand, was silently looking out the window. She didn't know if he was from the military, but his posture was as straight as a pine tree. You. Bai Ran hesitated and finally said, "Do you have time tonight?" Gu Changza turned to look at her. "What's wrong?" "My aunt said that she wants to meet you." Bai Ran quickly explained. "After all, they raised me since I was young, so I'm considered half a newlyweds. Now that we're married, she said that she wants to invite you for dinner." Before Gu Changza could say anything, she said guiltily, "If you really don't have time, then forget it. I haven't said anything." The man frowned slightly and said, "Do you want to have dinner together?" "Yes." "Okay." The man agreed without hesitation. Bai Ran finally sighed in relief. Gu Changza, Jiang Bai Ran. Their names were called from the window. Gu Changza stood up, and Bai Ran hurriedly got up as well. They followed him to the window, and the staff handed them 2 brand new marriage certificates. Congratulations to the two newlyweds. A handsome man and a beautiful woman, what a match. Gu Changza took the marriage certificate and handed the other one to her. When Bai Ran received the marriage certificate, she felt like she was floating. Felt so surreal. When she flipped to the next page, her name, date of birth, age, and the photo of the two of them sitting in front of a red background, she was really married. She had married a man she had known for less than a day. No wedding, no garland, no diamond ring. She had married herself off so carelessly. For a moment, Bai Kun didn't know if his choice was right or wrong. Gu Changza looked at her stunned face and still felt that it was a pity. It was too rushed, and I didn't have time to prepare a diamond ring. However, it won't be too late to prepare for the wedding. Wedding? Bai Hao looked up in surprise. Our wedding? What is it? Gu Changza raised his eyebrows. Don't you want to hold a wedding? How could he not want to hold one? Like every girl, a wedding was the most important ceremony in her life. He was looking forward to this ceremony, but at the same time he was filled with fantasy. He wondered what her wedding ceremony would be like. Bai Yu chuckled. There's no rush for the wedding. Most importantly, they would first get to know each other and cultivate feelings for each other. The wedding would be a matter of course. Chapter 4584. At noon, Gu Changza and Bai Ran went to a restaurant for lunch. It was a simple Chinese meal, but the restaurant Gu Changza chose was in the most inconspicuous corner of the street. It was not far from the marriage registration office, but the food was delicious. Gu Changza parked his car in the underground parking lot. He drove a Volkswagen. She had seen many Volkswagens, but it was the first time she saw this model. The letters Phaeton were printed on the back. In this city, people who drove Volkswagens were salaried workers and the rich. This man seemed to come from an ordinary family. This car looked very ordinary, but once inside, The luxurious interior made Bai Kun a little dumbfounded. The control panel seemed to be made of mahogany. Was it modified? Where are we going? To buy gifts. Gifts? Yeah. Gu Chengza drove the car to the shopping center. To Bai Ran, they were her uncle and aunt, but to Gu Chengza, they were his parents-in-law. It was his first time visiting his parents-in-law, so he naturally had to bring some gifts. Gu Chengza went to the shopping center and bought a pearl necklace for Yi Yuqin. Bai Ran said that Yi Yuqin liked pearl necklaces the most, and her uncle Jiang Muyuan liked jade pipes. The old man next door had a jade pipe every day, and Jiang Muyuan was always envious. Other than the gifts for their first meeting, Gu Chengza also bought cigarettes, alcohol, donkey hide gelatin, and some women's skincare products. In total, it cost nearly 10,000 yuan. Bai Ran was a little embarrassed. It was her first time eating with Gu Chengza, and she was already spending so much money. When it was time to pay, Bai Ran looked at the number on the meter and felt her scalp tingle. She looked at Gu Chengza's back with guilt and said nervously, "This time, I've made you spend so much money." Gu Chengza turned around and was stunned, but he smiled. "What do you mean by spending money? It's my first time meeting my parents-in-law, so I have to be polite." Bai Ran was secretly touched by his thoughtfulness and courtesy. She wondered if her aunt would be satisfied with him when he returned home. Would she let her go? Marrying this man seemed to be the most rebellious thing she had ever done in her life. Due to the fact that her aunt had brought her up, no matter how harsh her aunt was to her, she was used to accepting it. She thought that as long as she married this man, then in the future she could finally get away from the endless blind dates. She admitted that when she was with him, he was like a safe haven. When he got home, Gu Chengza parked the car in front of the neighborhood. When he got out of the car, he looked at the shabby neighborhood that was obviously built in the last century and was slightly surprised. "Did she live in this place?" "My house is in this building." Bai Ran pointed at a building in front of him shyly and said, "But there's no elevator. We have to climb the stairs." "I'm fine." Gu Chengza picked up the gift and said to her, "Let's go upstairs." He followed behind her and walked up the stairs. However, in the narrow corridor, other than being crowded, the corners were filled with cobwebs, and the originally white walls were covered in dust. The escalator was covered in dust, and the air seemed to be a little turbid. On the first floor there were 5 households. The smoke was all directed towards the corridor. When it was mealtime, everyone was cooking, and all kinds of smoke and fumes filled the air. Chapter 4585. We're here. She walked to the door. Through the door, Bai Ran could hear the sound of cooking in the kitchen. Bai Ran took out her keys to open the door. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Yi Yuqin walked out of the kitchen. When she saw Bai Ran, she quickly asked, "Where is he?" "He." Bai Ran turned around. At that moment, Gu Chengza stepped through the door. He was so tall that he had to lower his head slightly to enter the door. It felt like he would hit the door frame. His tall height made the whole house seem even shorter. However, when Yi Yuqin saw his incomparably handsome face, her entire body froze. The man in front of her was a little too young. Also, he seemed different from the person in the photo. The owner of the renovation company in the photo was bald and old. What about the man in front of her? He was even better looking than the male celebrities on TV. More importantly, he had an inexplicable aristocratic aura. However, Yi Yuqin quickly pulled Bai Ran aside and asked suspiciously, "Who is this person?" "His name is Gu Chengza. We just registered our marriage today." As she spoke, Bai Ran took out the household registration booklet from her bag and returned it to her. Yi Yuqin immediately knocked the booklet in her hand to the ground. "Gu Chengza. That's not the name of the man I introduced to you on a blind date." Bai Ran explained, "That man didn't like me, so how is that possible?" Yi Yuqin didn't believe it. "He saw your photo and was very satisfied with you. He couldn't stop praising you. How could he not be satisfied with you? I think you're the one who's not satisfied with him. Auntie, that man is so old. It's fine if you set me up on a blind date, but why do you always find me this kind of man?" Bai Ran also vented her dissatisfaction. Yi Yuqin was furious when she heard that. Gu Chengza walked over and handed the gift to Yi Yuqin. "Hello, Auntie. I'm Gu Chengza. Nice to meet you." Yi Yuqin looked at him, But she was so angry that she couldn't say anything. She ignored Gu Changza and pulled Bai Ran into her room. After closing the door, she pushed Bai Ran to the wall and asked fiercely, "So you said you want to get married with the household registration booklet. You want to marry this man?" "Yeah." "So?" Yi Yuqin panicked. "Have you registered your marriage?" "Yes." Bai Yu took a deep breath and puffed out her chest. "He's my husband now. Pa." What she received was Yi Yuqin's exasperated slap. "Do you know how much money I've spent on this blind date? I gave them a golden bracelet before they were willing to introduce it to me." Who was Emotsong? He was the big boss of Dingshang Renovation Company, and his net worth was close to 100 million. So what if he's old? The most important thing for a man was not his good looks. Could good-looking people make a living? Can it feed you? Bai Kun finally couldn't take it anymore. Why should I rely on a man to support me? Can't I feed myself? You even know how to talk back. Yi Yuqin was about to be slapped again. This time, Bai Ran didn't give in. Instead, he forcefully grabbed her wrist. Chapter 4586. Bai Ran's words were like pearls. "So you raised me just to eat my flesh." These words obviously provoked Yi Yuqin. "What do you mean by eating your flesh? Why do you make it sound so bad?" Yi Yuqin said exasperatedly, "You also know that I raised you and this is how you repay me? You also admit that you're forcing me to repay you." Bai Ran was so angry that she was about to cry. "Do you know that when I heard that man say that you sold me for a house, I was really disappointed?" "What do you mean I sold you for a house? How did I sell you? I sent you to a rich family to live a good life. Is that my fault? Then why didn't you bless me and him?" The him that Bai Ran was referring to was Gu Changza. "I'm also very happy with him." Yi Yuqin's face was ferocious. "What can he give you?" Bai Ran gritted her teeth and said, "What he can give me is not important. I think the most important thing is whether he can give you anything." Yi Yuqin was speechless. "Originally, after you registered your marriage with him, he said that he wanted to visit you. In the end, you didn't like him from the moment he entered the house. You're married, right? You have a man to support you, right? You're all grown up now. You dare to talk to me like this? If you're so capable, get out of here and don't come back." Yi Yuqin pointed at the door in a threatening tone. Bai Ran looked at her deeply and suddenly sneered. "Fine. I'll leave." She had heard this countless times. Finally, this time she was disheartened. Yi Yuqin did not expect that the soft and cowardly Bai Ran would know how to resist her. She turned around, opened the door, and walked to Gu Chang.